Episode 6, Xin Haoyue became silent at this question. Xin Haoyue looked at him confusedly. It's not a simple accident, right? He then said, Father and mother planned to go to a concert today, but they got into a car accident on their way there. After the accident, the culprit ran away. It's still under investigation right now. I looked at the security footage my assistant sent and it seems intentional. Xin Haoyue knitted her eyebrows tightly. Intentionally? Just like when someone wanted to kill her and Chen Xinan? Was it really the culprit Sheng Wenyan was talking about? Xin Haoyue mocked herself for being too stupid. She had completely forgotten about this time bomb after experiencing blissful and peaceful days. She glanced at Xin Chancheng, then at Chen Xinan. She said, Is it the same person as last time? She noticed that Chen Xinan squinted his eyes when he heard this. Xin Chancheng looked at him too. Chen Xinan was silent momentarily before he exclaimed in a deep voice, Maybe we can start investigating from that person. Xin Haoyue saw that Xin Chancheng had a gloomy face, clearly knowing what Chen Xinan was talking about. She hurriedly asked, Who? She. Xin Haoyue scrunched her eyebrows. Her? After they confirmed the direction of investigation, Xin Chancheng and Chen Xinan each used their networks to help investigate the woman. The elders of the Xin family woke up the next day. Seeing that all three of them were present, they couldn't help but ask, Why are you guys all here? Father, you guys just need to rest. We'll take care of the rest. Xinjin knew that this wasn't an accident. That worn-down car had driven over at such an extreme speed that he knew that it was meant for them. It felt like the driver wouldn't have given up unless they died in the car accident. He recalled that the Xin family had never offended anyone before. Then, why did this person hate them so much? He was heavily injured. Since Xin Chancheng insisted on leaving the matters to them, he'd trust them. In the following days, Xin Haoyue requested many days of absence from work in order to accompany them. She would make trips between the house and the hospital every day. Chen Xinan would cancel meetings and dinner invitations from time to time in order to pick her up. Sometimes he would stay at the hospital at night with her. This day, Xin Chancheng stayed the night with the parents in the hospital. He shooed Xin Haoyue home to rest. In less than a week, Xin Haoyue's face had lost some of its fat, and there were bags under her eyes. Chen Xinan originally wanted to take her home, but thinking that she would be the only one there, he decided to bring her back to his house. After Xin Haoyue got in the car, she was on the verge of falling asleep. When they arrived at his apartment, Chen Xinan carried her out of the car. Xin Haoyue placed her hand on his shoulder and asked confusedly, Are we home? Yes, you can continue to sleep. You got me. Okay. When she finished her words, Xin Haoyue found a comfortable spot on him and peacefully fell back asleep. When she woke up the next morning, it was quite early, but because she had a great sleep last night, she was refreshed. She rolled over to see Chen Xinan sleeping by her side. His breath was even, and she couldn't help but observe him for a while. Then she reached over and kissed his face. After that, she went to the kitchen. After Chen Xinan woke up, he patted the spot next to him. The blanket had no warmth anymore. Clearly, she had been up for a while. After he rinsed, he walked downstairs. He noticed that she was wearing an apron and busying herself in the kitchen. Seeing him standing by the kitchen door and staring at her, she smiled. You're up? We can eat breakfast. She prepared a light breakfast but made some soup for her parents. Chen Xinan walked over and hugged her from behind. He lowered his head and kissed her earlobes. He reminded her, Don't exhaust yourself. I'm not tired. She became silent for a while before she continued. Nan, I want to discuss something with you. Okay. I already informed my workplace a few days ago. I will be quitting the job. Chen Xinan stopped kissing her and asked, Do you need my help? Xin Haoyue shook her head. I already contacted Shenzhen City's TV station. They welcomed me to join them. Chen Xinan slightly smiled and said in a low voice, Okay, welcome back, Lady Chen. Xin Haoyue couldn't help but grin too. She had considered moving her work back to Shenzhen City for a long time, and finally made the decision now. Firstly, it was just more convenient for her to take care of her parents. Secondly, she would be married soon. It was better to keep her family and work in the same city. It would save her the time to travel back and forth. However, I need to catch them up with my work. Plus, I also need to do some tidying. Okay, I'll come with you in a few days. After Gutong found out Xin Haoyue had quit her job, she smiled and said, At this rate, it feels like you're really ready to form a family with Chen Xinan. We are going to be married soon anyway. It's better if I come back now. Gutong supported her too. That's true. Your family's in this city as well. Oh, right. Remember to contact me after you get back. We can go out for lunch. Otherwise, the next time we see each other will probably be on your wedding. Xin Haoyue grinned. That works. Xin Haoyue returned to a city to complete the procedures while Chen Xinan accompanied her. But because of an urgent matter in the company, he had no choice but to hurry back to Shenzhen City. That night, Xin Haoyue and her colleagues gathered together for dinner. The next morning, she invited Gutong out for breakfast. What shocked her was that Xiaoqiao came too. From what she knew, Xiaoqiao had been hosting a tourism variety show. Therefore, he would be constantly on the move. She hadn't seen him in a while. Xin Haoyue noticed that Xiaoqiao became tanner and skinnier. She asked him, Is the new show tiring? Xiaoqiao replied, It's okay, it's just hot over there. Xin Haoyue faintly smiled. Take care of yourself. Ugh. As Xiaoqiao said this, he finally looked up at her. He opened his mouth but didn't say anything else in the end. They were all college's students. Xin Haoyue naturally didn't mind Xiaoqiao tagging along. This was good. At least they could all gather together for a last meal before she had to go. Seeing that Xiaoqiao looked down and wasn't saying anything, Gutong helped to warm the atmosphere up. Haoyue, you already contacted the people at Shengjin City about your work? Yes, the interview that day was very successful. Gutong smiled and said, Of course. Based on your popularity, it's the TV station's loss for not accepting you. Don't say it like that. In a new workplace, I would have to start everything over. Gutong patted her chest and promised, Don't worry. I believe you. Okay. Xin Haoyue laughed too. They had a happy meal together. But in between the conversation, Xiaoqiao didn't talk much. Xin Haoyue could feel his careful gaze on her occasionally mixed with an unknown feeling. On the way back, Xin Haoyue and Gutong walked together. She asked Gutong, Are you for real when you told me you were going to pursue Xiaoqiao last time? Gutong immediately admitted, Of course it's true. Then how's it going for you guys now? Gutong thought about it before replying, Mission not accomplished. I will work harder. You're going to have to work harder. I'll be waiting to attend your wedding feast. To Xin Haoyue, Gutong and Xiaoqiao are her two best friends in this city. If they could be together in the future, that would be the best. I'll try my best. I'll either succeed or die trying. Xin Haoyue returned the words she had said to her. Don't worry, I believe in you. After bidding farewell with Gutong, Xin Haoyue returned to her apartment to pack up her things. Chen Xinan said that if she enjoyed being here, they could come live here frequently if they had time in the future. Therefore, Xin Haoyue didn't plan on packing everything. She simply packed essential items. When she finished packing up in the evening, Chen Xinan called her and asked when she would be back. Xin Haoyue thought about it before replying, In a bit. In another hour. I'll have Assistant Wang book a plane ticket for you. Okay, thank Assistant Wang for me. Chen Xinan hummed in agreement before he continued. How about me? How do you plan on thanking me? This, Xin Haoyue purposefully said. I don't want to thank you. Plus, I don't need to either. Chen Xinan smiled faintly. He was pleased that she didn't treat him as a stranger. He reminded, Be careful on your way. I probably don't have time to pick you up later, so I will have Assistant Wang pick you up. That's unnecessary. I can go back myself. Chen Xinan allowed her to have her way. When the plane landed in Shengjin City, it was nighttime. The airport was bustling with people. Xin Haoyue dragged her suitcase as she walked. She wore a white double-breasted coat and sunglasses. As she walked, her figure and temperament attracted many people's gazes. But before she could walk out of the airport, she was suddenly stopped by a man. The man wore a gray suit, but his suit wasn't like Chen Xinan's, meticulous. His suit was a bit wrinkled, and his blue tie was also crooked. Xin Haoyue stopped walking and looked at the man in front of her through her black sunglasses. He had an okay appearance, and she confirmed multiple times before coming to the conclusion that she didn't know him. Xin Haoyue took off her sunglasses and asked, Miss, you are? The moment she said this, numerous paparazzi surrounded them. Before Xin Haoyue figured out what happened, that man rushed over and hugged her. He sobbed and said as if he was wronged, Wife, I finally found you. Xin Haoyue would have never thought she was called wife under these circumstances. Chen Xinan had never called her that. He loved calling her wifey. Comparing the two, Xin Haoyue just realized how disgusting it was for the man to call her wife. He didn't have a fresh and pleasant smell like Chen Xinan. There was also a strong smell of smoke and sweat on him. Xin Haoyue struggled to free herself from him, but he seemed to be on guard. He hugged her tightly and refused to let go. She couldn't even move her arms. Let go. You got the wrong person. Quickly let me go. No, there's no way I got the wrong person. You're Xin Haoyue, my wife. I don't even know you. The cameras and phones flashed non-stop. Xin Haoyue was trapped in the middle. She couldn't struggle free or even escape. There were numerous people who recognized her, and they had all sorts of conversation. Isn't she Xin Haoyue? Wasn't she going to marry Chen Xinan? Heaven, that man called her his wife. Did she make Chen Xinan a cuckold? Whoa, who knew that she was a beautiful but immoral woman? It's really the annual show. When Xin Haoyue heard the comments, she had a grim expression. I'm telling you that, if you don't let me go, I'll make sure you'll have to face the consequences. Xin Haoyue shook from anger. Her clothes were infected by his smell, and it was a pungent smell. Wife, don't be with that man with surname Chen. I will do my best to earn money and support the family. Who exactly are you? Wife, I am Lin Hui. You're my wife. There's no way I would have mistaken you for someone else. Lin Hui, Xin Haoyue's mind went blank, and then it seemed like she remembered something. Heh. She calmed down and said, You said we're married. Then do you remember your tragic death the night we were married? His expression stiffened when he heard this. While he was shocked, Xin Haoyue harshly kicked his private part. He groaned and clenched in pain while she hurriedly dragged her suitcase and walked off. The paparazzi surrounding them still wanted to take pictures when Xin Haoyue turned around. She said cruelly, If you guys want your company to go bankrupt tomorrow, follow as you wish. Dare to see if Chen and Xin family has the capabilities to do this or not. It might be because she looked extremely serious and her voice was full of anger, but she stunned everyone and they remained unmoved. Xin Haoyue first called Xin Chancheng. Brother, I want you to beat someone up for me. Xin Chancheng was quite surprised at her request. Who bullied you? That bastard took advantage of me. Xin Chancheng didn't ask for the details, only a name. Lin Hui. After Xin Haoyue hung up, she sat in the car and felt her labored breathing. She was really angry. Bastard! Why did Lin Hui suddenly appear? He even knew that he was married with the female side lead of the novel, but ever since she transmigrated, she had never seen him. She suddenly thought of something. Was it possible he was reborn? But she tested him. Looking at his expression, he didn't seem to know. After pondering over this matter, the only possibility was that someone incited him. This person probably knew of the development of the novel as well. So, it wasn't just her who transmigrated into this book? Who could it be? Xin Haoyue thought hard about this but still couldn't come up with a conclusion. At this time, she received Chen Xinan's call. The moment she saw his name, Xin Haoyue felt her uneasy heart calming down. She answered the call and wanted to say something, but she realized that she choked with feelings. She couldn't say anything. On the other hand, was his incomparably anxious voice. Where are you? Xin Haoyue looked at the road and gave him an address. Chen Xinan said nothing but, I'll come over to pick you up. When Xin Haoyue heard he was going to pick her up, she got out of the car and waited by the side of the road. Chen Xinan arrived quickly. He parked his car and quickly got out. Before Xin Haoyue could see the color of his tie, she was brought tightly into his arms. Sorry, I came late. Xin Haoyue buried her head in his arms and breathed in his cool and pleasant smell. She couldn't help but greedily take in his scent. Then she hurriedly pushed him. There's a smell on me. What? That man has an unpleasant smell. When Xin Haoyue said this, she noticed that Chen Xinan's face turned incredibly gloomy. He held her hands and they got in the car. Then he drove the car to his apartment. When Xin Haoyue got out of the shower, she saw Chen Xinan calling someone by the balcony. Settle this matter for me. I don't want to see any news of it. Also, investigate thoroughly. I want to know who he is. Once Chen Xinan finished saying this, he detected footsteps coming closer. He turned around and the air around him became warmer. He placed his phone away and smiled at her. You're done? Yes. Xin Haoyue wore a white robe and her hair was still dripping. Chen Xinan took a clean towel over and wiped her hair for her. There's not a moment you would save me from worry. So, you're upset at me? Lady Chen, I don't dare. Xin Haoyue snorted and asked him, You already know? Don't you think I should know in the first moments? This angry tone, Xin Haoyue thought. She said something wrong. Xin Haoyue knew that she had said the wrong thing, and she felt the air around Chen Xinan turning colder. Once she saw his gloomy face, she hurriedly reached over to hug him. She acted cute. Honey, I'm wrong. Chen Xinan didn't push her away but didn't return the hug either. He coldly asked, What did you do wrong? Xin Haoyue adapted to her current situation and said, I should have told you the moment I was in trouble. Xin Haoyue, do you think I'm only angry because of this? Xin Haoyue lowered her head and rubbed her face against his arms. I know. You're scared that I might get in an accident. But it happened too suddenly, and my mind was a mess. I wanted to call you, but I couldn't even explain what happened. How do you want me to explain this to you? As Xin Haoyue continued, her voice became a whisper. Chen Xinan listened to her voice and helplessly asked, You feel wronged? Xin Haoyue retorted, Of course. A random man suddenly ran over and called me his wife. He'd taken advantage of me. How could I not feel wronged? Even having my brother beat him up won't make me any less angry. You haven't even called me that. He had really taken advantage of me. Listening to her angry but upset words, Chen Xinan comforted. Don't be upset. We'll get revenge for everything he had done. If you still can't vent your anger, we'll make him pay double. Xin Haoyue felt his palm gently patting her back, as if comforting her. She looked up at him and softly asked, You believe me? Were you not suspicious of that person? I was suspicious of that person, but you're my wife. Why would I go and believe a random stranger instead of you? Chen Xinan. There are a lot of suspicious points here. He looked deeply at her and asked, Have you seen him before? Xin Haoyue shook her head. I don't know him. Although she knew that person had married the original Xin Haoyue later on. After he was caught with adultery, he were ruthlessly murdered. He didn't deserve to live and harm others, but she couldn't tell Chen Xinan anything. Xin Haoyue thought about it before asking, Do you think someone is behind what happened today? Chen Xinan was silent momentarily before he responded. In the future, I'll take you out. You have to pay attention to your surroundings. Otherwise, I'll send 2 bodyguards to look over you. Xin Haoyue immediately rejected. That's not necessary. I need to report to the TV station tomorrow. Hearing her rejection, Chen Xinan was a bit unhappy. Xin Haoyue hurriedly added on, I promise that whatever happens, I will try my best to escape safely. My safety will be my top priority, okay? Chen Xinan sighed. You have to protect yourself. Regarding today's matter, leave it to me, okay? After Xin Haoyue and Chen Xinan had a simple lunch, the two returned to Xin family to visit Xin Jin and Bai Ning. They recovered pretty good, and because there was a personal doctor at home, they decided to leave the hospital a few days early. When Xin Haoyue saw the two of them, she happily greeted, Father, Mother. They had weird expressions on their face. She looked at the two and then at Chen Xinan. Uncle, aunt, what's the matter? Chen Xinan asked first. Xinjin said, Xinan, sorry to trouble you, but please have a seat in the living room for a while. Your aunt and I have to talk to Haoyue. Chen Xinan looked at their expressions and continued. Uncle, aunt, are you guys referring to what happened at the airport? When he mentioned this, Xinjin and Bai Ning both held awkward expressions. Chen Xinan explained, this was probably intentional. They have a simple motive, drive a wedge between me and Yuer. At the same time, give her a bad reputation. That way the elders will have bad impressions of her. And secondly, the audience who had been supporting her would also become her anti-fans. When Chen Xinan finished his explanation, the two elders had solemn looks. He chuckled and said, I can't help but say this was a really good plan, taking out 3 birds with 1 stone. When Xinjin haheard this, he looked at Xin Haoyue and asked, Haoyue, you haven't done anything of that sort, right? Xin Haoyue felt helpless. Father, mother, who do you think I am? Even Chen Xinan believes me unconditionally. How could you guys be suspicious of me? I really don't know that person, and have nothing to do with him. Bai Ning patted her chest. Thankfully you haven't. Thankfully you haven't. When your father and I had seen the comments online, we didn't even know what to do. The comments online? Xin Haoyue understood what happened. She explained, Mother, father, one could casually hire online water armies and exaggerate and hype the comments. You guys don't need to worry about this. We will try to resolve this issue quickly. Okay, the sooner you do, the better. Lately, lots of things have happened. We're not sure who's behind this, but they're quite ruthless and cruel. Mother, the truth will be revealed one day. As to when the truth will be revealed, let's just watch. After all, there is always a solution to the problem. We won't admit defeat. When Bai Ning heard this, she was slightly at ease. Okay, you have to pay more attention in the future. Safety first. Okay, it was getting late. Xin Haoyue brought Chen Xinan out. At the door, Chen Xinan asked her, You really don't plan on letting me stay? How could Xin Haoyue not know what he was thinking? She smiled and purposefully said, President Chen, you live in Shenzhen City as well. It's not even a half-hour ride home. Even half an hour is too long. Xin Haoyue teased, How about you buy a house near my house, just like in a city? But Chen Xinan said, I can't afford it. Lately, I have been saving money in order to marry my wife. Xin Haoyue joked, Oh, you can't afford to marry her? Then don't marry her? Of course not. Even if I have to live a frugal life, I must marry my wife. Humph. Xin Haoyue giggled. When we're married, I have a valid reason to stay over at your place. When Chen Xinan said this, he walked over and hugged her. He lowered his head and pecked her lips. He let her go and said, Next time, I'll be seeking both capital and profit from you. Xin Haoyue pushed him. Hurry back and be careful on your way. Call me when you're home. Okay, I'll pick you up tomorrow morning. Okay. Xin Haoyue was reluctant to part with him, but watched him leave in the end. Then she returned to her room and accompanied Bai Ning for a while. Bai Ning held her hand and said, Xinan is pretty good. Xin Haoyue grinned and said, Mother, don't compliment him in front of his face. He's quite proud. If you compliment him, he probably will be arrogant for a while. You're loquacious. Xin Haoyue felt wronged. I was just saying the truth. It's really rare to see a man like him. You need to treasure him. Once you guys are married in the future, you guys have to learn to accept each other's shortcomings and get along with each other. Mother, I know, we will definitely be good together and not let you guys worry. Mother, rest soon, and I'm going to sleep now. I have to work tomorrow. Then hurry back and sleep. Bai Ning hastily responded. Mother, you too. Xin Haoyue returned to her room, and her smile faded. She turned her laptop on and logged on Weibo. She noticed that her name was already among the top few names of the rankings for discussion. Under the discussion, insults were hurled at her constantly. After scrolling through the pages, she found out that the people who still supported her were completely outnumbered. There were all sorts of insults. For example, she was called an unchaste person and involved in moral turpitude. She was also branded a mistress who made Chen Xinan a cuckold. The insults were vivid and colorful, as if it was the truth. To her expectation, the video of what happened at the airport wasn't released. After knowing that someone was behind this, Xin Haoyue was too lazy to clear her name. As long as she knew that she was innocent, she'd let the users insult her however they like. What she needed to do right now is wait and see. When she went to work the next day, she greeted her new colleagues and got used to the environment. After that, she immediately went into a meeting with the staff of the TV station. Although she worked in a new place, she was still the host of an interviewing show. This was a walk in the park for her. The TV station planned on making her the host of the next episode. This time, they would be interviewing the popular writer, Shi. When Xin Haoyue heard this name, she suddenly looked at the projector in the center of the conference room. The young face was Shi, who she hadn't seen for a while. Shi became an instant hit. Her first book was The Chairman's Arrogant Wife. After it was published, it was immediately sold out. 2 months on the market, the sales had reached dozens of 10,000s. Because of this, Shi became one of the best sellers of romance novels. There were many readers who hoped that we could interview her and understand her process of writing. Host Xin, we already scheduled a time with her. It's Friday morning. When the time comes, we hope to record her. You, Host Xin? Host Xin? Huh? Xin Haoyue suddenly snapped out of her trance from looking at the pictures and cover of the book. While she fumbled about, she accidentally bumped the drinking glass by the upper right corner of her laptop. Xin Haoyue hurriedly grabbed a few napkins to wipe her laptop and the wet spot on the table. At the same time, she tried to keep her voice calm. I'm fine with that. Everyone looked strangely at her. Even the person standing glanced at her. They nodded and said, it's good that there aren't any objections. When the meeting was over, Xin Haoyue stared at the chairman's arrogant wife in her hands. She felt it burning. Although the cover and typesetting were completely different, the title was still the same. But the author was someone else. Could it be her? When Xin Haoyue returned to her office, she couldn't manage to eat lunch when she hurriedly opened the book to start reading. She stopped at the last page. Xin Haoyue raised her head, but when she looked at the blurry words on the page, she was unable to describe her feelings. My life had ended like this. Maybe not long from now, no one would ever remember my existence. The end. Xin Haoyue already forgot how to express her emotions. She held her breath, and she was incredibly shocked right now. She was positive that she had transmigrated as well. She was the original author. She was the one who created this world. Although the names in the book had changed, the characters and plot are still the same. The side female leads still paved the way for the male and female lead. After they were together, she still didn't give up. When the female lead had a miscarriage, she was the only one present. Therefore, the male lead believed she was the culprit who killed his child. In order to punish her, he made sure she lost her family. These familiar scenes were basically following the original development of the book. In the end, the female side lead's tragic ending was still the same. She married a slagman who had conspired against her. After she was caught with adultery, she was murdered by the slagman. Xin Haoyue's face was pale white, and she was unable to calm down even after a while. When exactly did the author transmigrated over? Or was she already in this world before she transmigrated? This author knew the entire plot. Therefore, she knew that she was the key as to why the plot had diverged from her original expectations. Xin Haoyue thought about this and was certain that someone was behind her parents' car accident and the numerous times she faced danger. The author refused to have someone change the world, so she wanted to get rid of her, so that the world would continue its original path. The more Xin Haoyue thought about it, the more frightening it was. How could she be so sinister and ruthless? Did she have enmity against her? When Xin Haoyue thought of this, she believed this must be the case. The original female side lead's name was Xin Haoyue. Therefore, she hated herself, which is why the author wrote her into the book and arranged a tragic ending for her. So how could she vent her anger when nothing was going her way? But Xin Haoyue clearly remembered that in the original world, she didn't recognize anyone who was an author. Plus, she cautiously and conscientiously lived a peaceful life. She didn't remember becoming enemies with anyone. Who are they exactly? Xin Haoyue couldn't come up with a conclusion, so she sat there for a while. Then she suddenly stood up and picked up her bag and the book on the table. She hurriedly ran out. When she received Xin Haoyue's call, she wasn't that surprised. Instead, she said in an arrogant tone, Host Xin, I hope everything's been fine for you. The moment Xin Haoyue heard her tone, she knitted her eyebrows tightly. She said disgustingly, Are you done playing your tricks? How could it be enough? She purposefully dragged her words. We still have a long time, and I haven't shown a lot of my tricks yet. This arrogant tone made Xin Haoyue clench her teeth in anger. Again, she was sure that this so-called she knew her and held a lot of hatred towards her. She didn't want to go in circles with her on the phone, so she directly said, Let's meet. Sure. I have been waiting for this. After Xin Haoyue arrived at the meeting spot, she waited another 15 minutes before she who wore a light blue denim coat, arrived late. She sat down and took off her sunglasses. She didn't even look at Xin Haoyue as she said, If you have something to say it quickly. This young miss's time is very treasurable. Xin Haoyue smiled at her meaningfully. Are you sure you have nothing to say to me? Heh. What a joke. You're the one who wanted to meet me, but you want me to say something first? Xin Haoyue, who do you think you are? I never think I'm outstanding or anything. After Xin Haoyue said this, she pursed her lips before continued. I always think you're the outstanding person, since you have created this world. Once she said this, Xin Haoyue saw her expression change visibly, as she expected. She was clearly the original author. Instead, she laughed. She played with her gorgeous red nails and said, You really think I'm that bored that I decided to rewrite the novel? Xin Haoyue, frankly speaking, the publisher of the novel was to intentionally cause you trouble. Don't forget that this is a virtual world. I created it. Even if you have everything right now and live the best life, don't forget that the ending of the novel will never change. You won't die a peaceful death. So what if I can't die a peaceful death? I enjoyed the entire process and received all the love. Even my dream came true. Who cares about the future? It's not something I can worry about right now. Xin Haoyue curled her lips. Regarding you, comparing the two of us, you seem miserable. You created this world, but you're stuck in it too. Heh, what bizarre news. I created the world so I can stay for as long as I wish to. But I am positive that if you want to leave here, death is the only way out. It's best if you die. Xin Haoyue's smile slightly faded. Well, at least I have you to accompany me. You. She was infuriated. She harshly glared at her and said, stop pretending in front of me. It makes me disgusted with you. Xin Haoyue, no matter whether we're here or in the other world, you will never live a better life than me. That's enough for me. So do we know each other? She tested. Don't try to get anything from me. I won't tell you. My guess is that we do. Xin Haoyue said to herself. You hate me. You extremely hate me. Yes, I hate you. Every day, I have been praying that you will die a tragic death. Xin Haoyue laughed. I can't believe you can write a book in this state of mind. It's quite strange to me. I'm only nasty towards you. Well, that's my honor. However, I want to advise you that even if I turn a blind eye towards you, Chen Xinan won't let you go easily. She said proudly. Even if he won't let me go easily, so what? Does he have any evidence? Xin Haoyue, don't forget that I'm the one who created him. I know everything about him. What he likes and what he doesn't like. Even his abilities. I know him better than you. Tell me, how long do you think it will take me to take over him? Xin Haoyue said calmly. The day you die. Xin Haoyue understood that even though she had created Chen Xinan, she was too prideful. Although it was a virtual world, it was also a real world. Chen Xinan was a human being and he has his own thoughts. She understood Chen Xinan. He won't do anything to upset her. She didn't mind. Right. Seeing that we're both from the same hometown, I'll give you another piece of advice. When the book is nearing its end, this world will tumble and fall apart. Nothing will exist in this world anymore. Of course, there's a way for this world to remain as it is. This method is... As she said this, she purposefully kept this a secret. She stood up and laughed. As long as I die, there will be no threat in this world. It will remain peaceful forever, and my ability to rewrite the plot will disappear as well. Xin Haoyue, think carefully. For yourself in this virtual world, are you going to kill me? Haha, just thinking about it is funny. I am looking forward to you killing me. Xin Haoyue. The sinister laughter pierced her ears more and more as she slowly walked off. Xin Haoyue remained seated. However, she felt the hair on her body stand up. She was a lunatic. She finally understood the deeper meaning of when Sheng Wenyang said, not everyone could remain calm like me. Sheng Wenyang was a rational person. Even though they were enemies, she wasn't driven to desperate actions. She was completely the opposite. In this world, she didn't have any concerns or apprehensions. Speaking bluntly, she was looking for death. But before she died, she hoped to pull someone to the underworld with her. Unfortunately, this person was Xin Haoyue. Xin Haoyue looked at the golden radiance out the window, hinting the presence of the evening. She squinted her eyes. She needed to ponder over Shishi's words and figure out the validity of her words. What called her attention was Chen Xinan's call. He asked her when she was done working because he wanted to take her out for dinner. Xin Haoyue gave him an address. Chen Xinan arrived in a bit and Xin Haoyue got in the car. He keenly noticed her weird expression. He asked, who did you go see? Xin Haoyue closed her eyes. After that, she tiredly and slowly opened her eyes. She said, she. Chen Xinan immediately asked, are you injured anywhere? He looked up and down at her carefully. Xin Haoyue shook her head. No, we just had a chat. She didn't do anything shocking. Plus, there were a lot of people there. She wouldn't dare either. Don't see her next time. Why? Xin Haoyue asked. What happened in the past led me to think she was behind this. However, I can't find any evidence. I'm having people find those who worked for her. Xin Haoyue felt her heart sinking. Could it be because she created her world so she naturally attracted people's attention? Can you find them? She asked. This is just one of the many ways. If it doesn't work out, there are other ways. How do you plan to handle this? Chen Xinan started the car and casually said, naturally punish her according to law. If the law can't punish her, then I'll give her a taste of her own medicine. On the way back, Xin Haoyue suddenly recalled Shishi's words. She half-teasingly said to Chen Xinan, oh right, I forgot to tell you some good news. What? Chen Xinan looked at the road ahead of him. He would look at her from the corner of his eye. Seeing her mischievous smile and sparkling eyes, he knew that she was up to something again. As expected, Xin Haoyue propped her chin and seemingly acted as if she was in deep thought. A certain Miss Shi wanted to pursue you and she seems to be very confident. Oh? Chen Xinan didn't care that much. So is Lady Chen jealous? Why would I be jealous? Xin Haoyue said generously. If you're really seduced by her, I'll definitely dump you and find someone younger and richer than you. I'll even marry them immediately. You're not doing your job well, Lady Chen. He looked deeply at her. Xin Haoyue purposefully blinked her eyes. She glanced at him, full of emotions. She said firmly, well, I believe that you won't do something that lacks class. Therefore, President Chen, don't disappoint your Lady Chen. Chen Xinan smiled and retorted, you're that confident in me? Of course, you have to behave well. Once she finished this, she patted his shoulders as if he carried a heavy burden. Chen Xinan glanced at her and shook his head helplessly. He focused on driving his car. Once he brought her home to Xin family, she unbuckled her seatbelt and turned around to say goodnight to him. Chen Xinan stared at her attempt to get out of the car. He reached over and grabbed her wrist. He saw in a low voice, that's it? What? Lady Chen, you want me to behave, but aren't there any rewards? Xin Haoyue wanted to retort when he lifted her chin with his warm fingertips. Then he kissed her. Chen Xinan pressed her shoulders as the kiss deepened. His hands started to move down. Xin Haoyue detected his fingers playing with the hem of her clothes and caressing her waist. She hurriedly reached over to stop his mischievous hand. She shook her head and said in an unclear voice, Don't, we're at my house. When Chen Xinan heard this, he slightly calmed down. However, he still breathed heavily. He leaned against her shoulders and tried his best to relax. He tried to entice her. Let's not go home tonight? What? I'll take you over to my place. Xin Haoyue was shocked by his warm breath on her. But she maintained her rationality and rejected. My parents haven't fully recovered yet. Plus, if she was at home in the middle of the night and stayed with Chen Xinan instead, her parents didn't even need to think about what they had done for the night. They probably would have guessed what happened. They weren't even married yet. Xin Haoyue didn't dare to be too presumptuous. The most important thing was that she was scared of losing her face. Therefore, why don't you hold it in? Xin Haoyue suggested in a low voice. Chen Xinan sighed heavily. It's better if I marry you sooner. Xin Haoyue soothed her. We will be married soon? In the end, the two lingered for a while before Chen Xinan unwillingly let her go back to her room. When Xin Haoyue returned home, she went to sort through her draft. Late at night, she rolled back and forth on her bed and still couldn't fall asleep. She knew that compared to Sheng Wenyang, Shi was harder to deal with. At the very least, Sheng Wenyang was smart. If she tried many times and still couldn't obtain Chen Xinan, she would work to find another way. However, Shi was different. She knew everything about herself, including everything she was unable to predict. Her actions made people feel like she was insane. It was too dangerous to deal with someone like her. Especially her attitude of making you go to the underworld with her. It was a real horror. Xin Haoyue knew that if she wanted to live peacefully with Chen Xinan in the future, she would need to get rid of Shi first of all. As long as she was still in this world, Xin Haoyue felt threatened. She didn't believe that Shi had the ability to rewrite what happens in this world. Destiny couldn't be controlled. Only people could control their lives. Xin Haoyue made a decision to get rid of this insane author as quickly as possible. She was unable to sleep and got out of bed early in the morning. Xin Haoyue went to find Xin Qiancheng to discuss the results of their investigation. Xin Qiancheng was eating breakfast when she arrived. He said slowly and gracefully while he was eating, I already had someone investigate this. When you and Chen Xinan faced danger last time, those rascals did receive money from their employer that they were to kill you. What perplexed me was after that day, they all vanished. Right now, I am having people search for them. We found the car who crashed into father and mother. Following the license plate, we found out that the driver was a person with mental disorder. His divorced wife already sold the car 2 months prior. Therefore, we have no clue who was in the car during the accident. Xin Haoyue quietly listened to this. She finally understood why Shi wasn't afraid of anything. She already cut off any clues that they had. Most importantly, she already handled the witness. Xin Haoyue had a solemn look. Can you try investigating Lin Hui? Lin Hui was half beaten to death when he finally confessed that a man had come to find him. They said that he will become successful in his career in the future and will marry you. He gave Lin Hui a huge amount of money to act out the scene at the airport. Lin Hui felt that there was no loss to this, so he took the money and went to find you. After Xin Haoyue listened to this, she coldly humphed. This person would do anything for money. I won't give him any chance to mess around in the future. Xin Qiancheng said positively. What do you mean? Xin Haoyue was confused. Xin Qiancheng stared at her before he slowly said, Chen Xinan found out that he was falsifying accounts for the company and using public money. Therefore, he was fired from the company in the first moments. No one would probably dare to hire him anymore. Well, he got off easy. Xin Haoyue said ruthlessly. Don't worry. He probably will have to spend the rest of his life in a hospital bed. Brother, you probably. Xin Qiancheng looked at her and replied, I did find someone to beat him up, but after I was done, Chen Xinan also found someone to beat him. His people was harsher than mine. Xin Haoyue said. He deserved it. After she was done chatting with Xin Qiancheng, Xin Haoyue went to work and thought that since she couldn't find any evidence of the things Shi had done, she had no choice but to lure her out. However, she didn't expect an accident to arrive so quickly. The day of the interview, Xin Haoyue felt like she was in a difficult situation. Work was the most important thing for her. She respected Shi and smiled out of politeness. However, Shi didn't cooperate with her. There were daggers hidden in her words. Not only did she mock her, she even started to blabber nonsense on the show. I wrote this novel for a simple motive, in order to take revenge on someone I hate a lot. I also wanted to remind her that her life won't be peaceful and for her to be careful. Once she finished, Shi glared fiercely at her. When she saw that Xin Haoyue knitted her eyebrows, her smile became brighter. Xin Haoyue laughed and said, Miss Shi, although I've never written a book, I think that a lot of people would have the same thoughts as me. Words are used to express our feelings and thoughts, not used for revenge. If you're writing with hatred, I believe that you will lose a lot of readers who have been supporting you in the future. Who knows how long this world will exist? Don't you think it's quite silly and stupid for you to talk about the future? Xin Haoyue looked coldly at her while Shi continued. There's no point in threatening me either. The TV station had invited me over, but you're not allowing me to speak as I wish. Xin Haoyue, it seems like you're fake just like this show. Xin Haoyue gazed sharply at her and said, You better restrain yourself. So what if I didn't? Shi said proudly. Do you want to kill me? Xin Haoyue, I want to see if you dare to. Unless you never want to enjoy your wealth and happy days that you've stolen from this world anymore. Ha ha. Xin Haoyue held her hands placed on her knee tightly. She had a burning gaze. Cut. The director finally couldn't hold it anymore. Miss Shi, since you've agreed to attend this show, please cooperate with us, okay? We can't broadcast this episode with what you've said so far. Shi crossed her arms over her chest and said proudly, You guys were the ones shamelessly begging me to attend your show. Now you guys dared to lecture me? Humph, you guys are just bullying a weak woman like me because you guys have more people. Miss Shi, you're overstepping your boundaries. The director tried his best to hold in his anger. Shi laughed. So what if I'm overstepping the boundaries? What can you do about it? Whether we can do anything to you depends on whether you have the ability to laugh until the end. Shi, you're not in charge of this world. Xin Haoyue couldn't help but exclaim. You think that by replacing Shen Wenyang, you're the right and proper female lead? Let me tell you, don't even think about it. I already have rewritten the novel's ending. You will only be Shen Wenyang's substitute, and you will happily die for her. Regarding Chen Xinan, whatever happens to me is the least of your concerns. Shi was in the middle of her words when a deep and stern male voice took over. Xin Haoyue almost immediately glanced over when she heard the voice. From afar, Chen Xinan wore a black suit and was walking closer and closer. Xin Haoyue received his gaze and she hurriedly walked over to him. Why did you come? Chen Xinan reached over to place his arm over her thin and weak shoulders. I'm scared that something might happen to you, so I came over to take a look. I even brought someone over. What? Xin Haoyue looked shockingly at him. Then her attention was attracted by the two young men wearing black suits who were led by Assistant Wang. The person walking in front slightly nodded at Chen Xinan and then walked towards Shi. That man nodded at Chen Xinan and then walked towards Shi. Xin Haoyue looked confusedly at Chen Xinan. He smiled and reassured her. Xin Haoyue was shocked and her gaze followed the two. She watched as one of them took out a pair of handcuffs from their back pockets. Xin Haoyue stared at them and couldn't help but think, They're police? As expected, the man who seemed to be familiar with Chen Xinan took out his ID and said with imposing manner, Miss Shi, I am the leader of Shengjin City's criminal police squad. We have reliable evidence and witnesses to prove that you have attempted twice to murder someone. Now, we are going to arrest you. The moment the man revealed his status, the staff all gasped except Shi. She remained unmoved. Do you guys have proof that I killed someone? If not, don't think about arresting me. Come to the police station with us, and we'll make sure you're convinced. I won't go. Shi widened her bright eyes. Leave me alone. You guys have no right to arrest me. Let me go. The other young man by the leader's side walked over and easily subdued Shi, who was trying to escape. The clear sound of the snapping of handcuffs rang. Xin Haoyue captured Shi's strange and horrific gaze on her. It's you guys. It must be you guys. Chen Xinan, Xin Haoyue, you guys are trying to frame me, right? I never murdered anyone. You guys aren't even dead. I didn't murder anyone. That man held her two shoulders forcibly and suppressed her. He said sternly, Leave whatever you have to say at the police station. Take her away. When the leader said that, Shi was brought away. Xin Haoyue, don't be too happy. I will definitely come back. I will definitely live longer than you. When the time comes, I'll have you see how you will die. Wait for it. People's scalps felt numb at the ear-piercing voice. While Xin Haoyue knitted her eyebrows and was in a trance, the leader said, I'll interrogate her and notify you of the result. Chen Xinan said, Thank you. That man smiled and said, Ever since I knew you, you never asked me to help you with anything. This time you actually asked me, so I naturally can't just do nothing. Although it might take some time to investigate this, don't forget that you owe me a favor. Of course, Chen Xinan laughed. Okay, on the day of your wedding, remember to call me. No problem. The leader continued. If you have time, bring your woman to the police station so we can record what happened and go through the procedures. Okay. After Chen Xinan bade farewell with him, he turned to look at Xin Haoyue and asked, Since the guest is going to the police station, does that mean you can get off work earlier? Xin Haoyue's eyelashes slightly trembled. So, just how long has Chen Xinan been planning this? She couldn't understand the process. In the morning, Xin Chancheng clearly told her that they couldn't find any evidence or witnesses. How did the police end up arresting her in the afternoon now? On the way, Xin Haoyue couldn't help but ask, what happened? Chen Xinan's slender fingers were tapping and creating a rhythm. He looked out the window, clearly in a great mood. The blue sky, white clouds, and the bright sunshine. When he heard her question, he turned around to ask, What? My brother clearly said that it's hard to find evidence against Shi. Even she was confident that she would never be defeated. How did you guys find the evidence? Chen Xinan said. In this world, as long as you have networks and money, you can do anything. She was too arrogant and believed that she was flawless with her plans. In reality, she left loopholes. In order to make her plead guilty, I already found the evidence and witnesses against her. What a pity that she didn't succeed in murdering, so she could only be sentenced lightly. However, 10 years of jail should be enough for her to repent sincerely and mend her mistakes. Xin Haoyue quietly glanced at him before gradually smiling. Although I don't know her that well, I don't think she's the type of person to repent and mend her mistakes. What you're saying is... I don't mean anything. I just think it's quite bizarre for someone like her to be alive. Chen Xinan reached over to hug her. He comforted her and said, there are all sorts of people in this world. It's nothing strange. After seeing many of them, you get used to it. That's true. 10 years should be enough. Xin Haoyue said and then added in her heart, who knew if this world could last another 10 years? Was this an unrealistic story or a dream? She couldn't tell the difference anymore. If she was saying the truth, time would stop after 2 years of his marriage. Did that mean everyone would continue to exist or disappear? Will she die? Or return to her previous world? Or would this be put to an end? She couldn't tell. What are you thinking about? Seeing that she was in a trance and her tightly knitted eyebrows ever since she was arrested, Chen Xinan asked a bit anxiously. Oh, nothing. As she said this, she reached over to hug his arms. She smiled and moved closer to him. She asked, then can we focus on preparing our wedding now? We have always been preparing the wedding, only you hadn't placed this in your heart. Don't I have you still? Since you're handling this, I naturally don't need to worry about it, right? Well, you're great at sweet talking. You have to treasure these moments. I don't easily soothe someone. Oh, should I thank Lady Chen for this honor then? Of course. On their way, they chatted about random things. After eating, Chen Xinan brought her to look at furniture. After Xin Haoyue looked through it carefully, she finally settled for a few. Why are we buying new furniture? She asked. We clearly need to buy new things for our wedding. Xin Haoyue blinked her eyes. Oh, she understood. On their way back, Chen Xinan went to answer a call. Xin Haoyue looked at the time and noticed that it was already 10 p.m. Chen Xinan had Bluetooth on and he concentrated on listening to what the other person was saying the entire way. He would occasionally respond in a few words. Before he hung up, he said, when you have time one day, let's have lunch together. Okay, this is it for now. Xin Haoyue looked ahead and didn't plan on asking him who called. However, Chen Xinan mentioned it first. My friend called and said that he interrogated her for a few hours. She already pleaded guilty, but she made a request. She wanted to see you for the final time. As Chen Xinan said this, he looked at her expression. If you don't want to see her, Before Chen Xinan finished his words, Xin Haoyue continued, I'll go see her. She slightly smiled. I have some questions to ask her anyway. Xin Haoyue went to the police station the second day after she got off work. The leader personally brought her over to visit Shi. She didn't expect that within a day, Shi's hair was scattered and her eyes were blank and empty. When she saw Xin Haoyue, her eyes brightened. The light flickered and then diminished. Shi sneered. Chen Xinan was more powerful than what I expected. But don't be too happy. Despite him defeating me, you guys still have Sheng Wenyang between your relationship. Xin Haoyue mocked her. Can't you tell the situation right now? Do you think Sheng Wenyang could be an obstacle between the two of us anymore? Either you're underestimating Chen Xinan or thinking I'm easily bullied. You're easily bullied? Xin Haoyue, don't you think you're funny? If it weren't for you, how would I end up to be so miserable and tragic? It's all your fault. This was all your fault. What hatred do you have against me? I won't tell you. You can live with this puzzle forever. As for me, the moment I die, I can finally return to that world. As for you, you can die with this virtual world. Ha ha! As she said this, she laughed loudly and unrestrained. She said, in this virtual world, only you, a fool, would take everything so seriously. Ha! Ha ha! You're such a fool. Xin Haoyue held a gloomy face. Then she continued to listen to her. There's a way for you to continue living. Do you want to try? Xin Haoyue looked deeply at her and said, I won't believe whatever you're saying. It's okay if you don't believe it. Whoever cares about this virtual world is a fool. If you're willing to personally kill yours and Chen Xinan's child and use their blood as a sacrifice, maybe you can get your wish. Xin Haoyue, there's only one chance. The moment the child is born, it's up to you if you choose to kill them or not. Xin Haoyue stared at her and then said, lunatic. Ha! Ha! When Xin Haoyue came out of the police station, she was in a daze. Shi's words can't be believed. No matter what, she won't believe it. She walked a few steps and saw the silver Mercedes by the police station door. The car window descended halfway and Chen Xinan had his eyes on his phone. Maybe he had detected her gaze, but Chen Xinan placed his phone away. He slightly looked up and in the direction of her. Then he smiled at her. Xin Haoyue was stunned, but then smiled at him too. She walked towards him quickly and asked, Why did you come? Chen Xinan got out of the car and opened the door for her. I came to pick you up. You're off work that early today? No matter how important work is, my wifey is more important. Xin Haoyue, who was about to get in the car, paused. Then she looked up and kissed his face. She smiled and said, "Sorry to trouble President Chen." Chen Xinan touched his cheeks, which were just pecked by her. He couldn't help but laugh. "That's stingy. You're only going to kiss my face?" Xin Haoyue, who was in the middle of buckling her seatbelt, stopped and then looked up. She grinned and replied, "President Chen, stop being greedy and asking for more." Chen Xinan grinned and walked around, getting into the car. After Chen Xinan picked her up from the police station, he drove north. Xin Haoyue stared at the unfamiliar road and inquired, "Where are we going?" "Our home." Xin Haoyue's eyes slightly flickered. For a moment, she said nothing. Seeing her reaction, Chen Xinan knew that she would be even more surprised after personally seeing their home. Imagining her cute reaction, Chen Xinan looked forward to this. When they arrived at their destination, it was already dark. When Chen Xinan got out of the car, he smiled and said, "What a pity that we came here late. Tomorrow morning, I will bring you to check out the garden in the backyard." The place Chen Xinan brought her to was slightly north of Shengjin City's bustling center. Although Xin Haoyue wasn't in Shengjin City that often, she heard that this place was already in construction since 2 years ago. It was going to be built into a luxurious mansion, and it was priceless. Xin Haoyue stared at the landscape ahead of her. It was a very distinguishable mansion. She asked a bit unbelievably, "This is yours?" So Chen Xinan had contracted this land? Chen Xinan walked up and held her hands as they went inside. He corrected her seriously, "It's not mine, it's ours, our shared property." Xin Haoyue looked at him and was at a loss of words. After a while she reacted and hurriedly asked, "So you've been planning our new home since a long time ago?" Chen Xinan nodded. "I designed the entire mansion." He continued, "If you don't like something, we can only change it after our wedding." Xin Haoyue shook her head. He casually asked, "What? You don't like it?" "No, I like it very much," Xin Haoyue thought in her heart. "I like everything." Chen Xinan nodded in satisfaction. Then he held her hands and slowly took her for a tour in their new home. Xin Haoyue was shocked and flabbergasted by his designs. She couldn't help but say that Chen Xinan has good taste and was very talented. The interior design, placement, murals, crystal lamps, and even the study's design was to her heart's content. While Chen Xinan showed her the way, Xin Haoyue sighed in admiration. She realized that she was extremely excited. He even designed the bedroom considerately. However, Xin Haoyue was slightly unhappy with the gray pillow and blankets on the bed. She said, "I don't like this color." Chen Xinan followed her and finally saw that she didn't like a certain part of the room. He smiled and asked, "What color do you like then?" "Something that's more cheerful," she tested. "Okay, when we're married, we can use red blankets." When he said this, Xin Haoyue felt him walking over and hugging her from behind. He lowly chuckled and enticed her. "Since buying this bed, we haven't tried sleeping in it." She and Chen Xinan had bought the majority of the furniture yesterday, but he had carefully selected this bed. How could Xin Haoyue not know what he was thinking? She purposefully replied, "President Chen, you should believe in your taste." Chen Xinan reached over to caress her smooth skin. He softly kissed her earlobe and said, "I won't be at ease until we've tried it." Xin Haoyue held his mischievous fingers and Chen Xinan turned her around. He looked at her deeply and then cupped her face, kissing her. Xin Haoyue's hands, which were originally on his arms, couldn't help but wrap around his neck as the kiss became more and more intense. Chen Xinan detected her trying to stand on her tippy toes in order to respond to him. He held her waist and easily lifted her up. He walked a few steps and then pressed her down on the bed. Chen Xinan took off his jacket and kissed her again. Xin Haoyue slightly raised her body to cooperate with him. Chen Xinan showered his kisses down her body. He would either kiss or suck her skin. He didn't even forget to bring her hands on his chest. His hoarse voice enticed her. "Help me unbutton this." Xin Haoyue panted. She opened her eyes to see him looking passionately at her. She blushed and slightly avoided his gaze. Her fingers trembled as she helped him unbutton his buttons. When the two were bare, Xin Haoyue's face was flushed and burning as Chen Xinan placed her on his lap. She held onto his shoulders with her hands and buried her head in his arms, eyes tightly closed. She allowed him to take control. Labor breathing, moaning, desire and passion. After a while, Chen Xinan carried Xin Haoyue, who was exhausted and lacking strength, into the bathroom. He helped to wash her and stared at her pink cheeks and the tears hanging by the corner of her eyes. Chen Xinan looked down and softly kissed the corner of her eyes. The smile on his face was warm. When Xin Haoyue laid on bed, she felt her body was still extremely sore. She pressed her waist, which didn't feel like hers anymore. She silently sighed and was grateful for persistently rejecting his request to have another round in the bathroom. If they had another round, Xin Haoyue felt like she didn't need to get out of the bed tonight. When Chen Xinan finished showering and came out wearing his robe, he saw Xin Haoyue, who was buried under the blankets. Her cheeks were still red from the warm shower. She was quite attractive. Therefore, he walked over and pulled the blankets to the side. He got in bed. When Xin Haoyue detected his long legs seemingly rubbing her calf, she couldn't help but kick him to the side a bit angrily. "Stop messing with me. I'm exhausted." Chen Xinan carried her in his arms and he kissed her forehead. He smiled and commented, "Wifey, you're lacking in stamina." "Go away." Xin Haoyue pushed him and said, "Can't you hold it in a bit? I have been controlling myself," Chen Xinan bluntly said. Xin Haoyue opened her eyes a bit and looked at him. She was very suspicious. She placed his hands on her waist and said softly, "My waist is sore." Chen Xinan knew what she wanted and he started to massage her. After a bit, he asked, "Lady Chen, are you satisfied?" Xin Haoyue sighed and nodded. "It's okay." After Chen Xinan had a taste of her, his wish was fulfilled. He didn't forget to offer his massaging services to her, and then he personally went to pick up the takeout. Downstairs, he served her food, and then he lazily held her as they watched the boring TV show. Chen Xinan suggested staying tonight, and Xin Haoyue thought about it before agreeing. She was really lazy and didn't want to move back. Therefore, she called Bai Ning and told her that she wasn't going back for the night. Bai Ning was surprised. "Are you working overtime tonight?" Xin Haoyue was embarrassed by this question. She paused before telling her the truth. "Mother, I'm not working overtime. I'm with Chen Xinan." Bai Ning was silent after hearing this. Then she said, "Oh, okay." Xin Haoyue just hung up when Chen Xinan smiled, pulling her in his arms. They've experienced this before. They know. Xin Haoyue glared at him. "Don't you dare do anything to me tonight. I need to go to work tomorrow." Chen Xinan gave her a straightforward answer. "Sure." Xin Haoyue originally thought that he would have acted shameless, but after seeing that he went straight to sleep while spooning her, she let her guard down and went into a deep sleep. Of course, as the truth proved, Chen Xinan was still wiser than her. When it was still dark outside, Xin Haoyue was woken up by his continuous harassing. Chen Xinan played with her tongue and his hand moved up her thigh. Her thigh was the most ticklish. After she was woken up by surprise, Chen Xinan immediately kissed her harder when her eyelashes flickered. Xin Haoyue couldn't breathe and she punched him. Ooh, Chen Xinan wasn't fully satisfied from the kiss, but he let her go. While he loosened his grip on her, Xin Haoyue said in an unclear voice, I can't breathe." Chen Xinan moved his kiss downwards and kissed her delicate collarbone. He grinned and said, "You'll get used to it after we kiss more often." Xin Haoyue had difficulty looking up. She gripped his shoulders tightly and then said in between breaks, "Didn't you promise me?" "What?" Chen Xinan paused to look at her puzzled look. Then he laughed. "It's the second day now." He suddenly tugged the strap on her robe off and quickly took off her clothes. Xin Haoyue only had time to gasp when he flipped her over. He pressed down and kissed the skin on her smooth back. She couldn't control herself and trembled and moaned. In the end, Xin Haoyue arrived half an hour late to work. Besides that, she felt as if her legs weren't hers anymore. When it was lunch break, she received Chen Xinan's call. But she didn't even think twice before hanging up on him. When Chen Xinan heard the robotic female voice on the phone, he wasn't irritated either. He turned to send her a message. He did take her too harshly. However, is it his fault that she was delicious and a feast for the eyes? After the first time, she was already panting. Her pale white skin was now red and flushed. He took an extra few glances before he became restless again. He hugged her and took her again. In the end, she bit his shoulder. Chen Xinan groaned in pain, but it made him even more excited. He was unable to control his strength and thrust it hard, making her cry for mercy. When Chen Xinan recalled the indescribable scene, his smile deepened. When Xin Haoyue was eating lunch, she saw his message, "Remember to eat so that you can replenish your strength." When Xin Haoyue saw the word strength, she recalled how he complained about her stamina in bed. Her ears became red and she quickly closed the text message. This shameless bastard. Both witnesses and evidence were present. Shi was sentenced to jail. On the other hand, Father Shi called her a stupid fool. But he spent the entire night trying to rescue her through his connections. Shi's mother had passed away. Her stepmother wasn't a nice person either. She was already displeased with Shi spending money like water and acting condescending in front of people. She had no manners at all. Hearing her husband trying to please people in order to beg them to help, she couldn't help but pour cold water on him and say, "If it were up to me, I think it's better if she stays in jail for a few years. That way, she can reflect upon herself. You won't need to spend all this money on her. Can't you talk like a human being?" Father Shi had been worried constantly and extremely busy trying to deal with this matter. Upon hearing her words, he angrily scolded her. "If I'm not talking like a human being, how could you even understand my words?" She sneered. "Do you not know how your daughter acts like? If she could hire people to murder someone, who knows if she might hire someone to murder me one day if she dislikes me. Of course, maybe she will become a lunatic and hire someone to murder her own father as well." "Shut up." "I won't. Why don't you think about it? Do you know who she was trying to kill? Chen and Xin family. She implicated 4 people. Are they even people she could touch? Heh. This time she was lucky that she wasn't dead. If Chen Xinan really wanted to take revenge, do you think we would still be alive? Do you think you could stand here and make calls? You should be satisfied." Once she finished, she didn't even look at Father Shi. She walked off. Shi family will probably meet its end sooner or later. Her words made Father Shi calm down. More or less, he knew that this was just a fruitless effort. But she was his daughter. No matter what, he couldn't just watch her go to jail without trying to rescue her. He knew that since Chen Xinan personally sent her to jail, Despite throwing the entire family's fortunes in to save her, it was impossible. He bowed down and dejectedly stood there. In the end, he called Chen Xinan and requested to meet him. Chen Xinan naturally didn't have time to see him. When Assistant Wang mentioned this, Chen Xinan replied, "No," without looking up from his work. He added, "If he called again, tell him that Xixi got what she deserved. I was already being merciful. If she doesn't behave, don't blame me for destroying her." Assistant Wang remembered his words. Chen Xinan paused and asked, "What's the situation in jail?" "There aren't any issues, but besides President Xi, who came to visit Xixi, Miss Sheng and Miss Lai went as well." Chen Xinan's gaze deepened. It seems like Sheng Wenyan has a pretty good relationship with Xixi. Miss Lai went to visit Xixi purely to hit her while she was down. In the past, she had suffered because of Xixi. Because of that, she wasn't that close to her anymore and stopped talking to her. Her impression of her changed when she went to question Xixi as to why she gave her a rotten idea. Xixi had mocked her and said, "You don't have any abilities, so you wanted to blame this on me. With an IQ like yours, how do you expect to climb on Chen Xinan's bed? Why don't you look in the mirror and take a look for yourself? Plus, why would you act according to my words? You're such a fool." As a child, Miss Lai had never been humiliated like this before. She clenched her teeth and glared at Xixi. "Stop acting so proud. I can't have Chen Xinan, but it's the same for you. Don't think that I don't know you're going after Chen Xinan as well. Humph, we're about the same. You're not any smarter than I am." Xixi replied in disdain, "Just watch and see." When Miss Lai thought of this, she couldn't help but smile pleasingly. When Xixi said, "Just watch and see," who would have knew it was this scene? After seeing her, she mocked, "How is it? Are the meals in jail tasty?" Xixi squinted her eyes. "Humph, no wonder you're a cannon fodder. Look at your manners." "What did you say? Are you deaf? You specially came to make fun of me, right? But what a pity that I never placed you in my eyes. Now that you've seen me, you can scram now." Miss Lai was quite infuriated. "I came to visit you out of kindness, and this is how you treat me." "Heh, are you really being kind? You know it best yourself." Xixi said this and laughed. Then she continued, "How is it? After being dumped by Chen Xinan, you plan on shifting this hatred on me? Are you bored?" "You!" Miss Lai suddenly stood up. Her expression was ugly. "Take care, and I won't bother seeing you out." Xixi didn't even spare her another glance. Humphed. She was the one who created her, an irrelevant character. She thinks that she's the main female lead? What a joke. But 2 days later, Sheng Wenyang, who was originally supposed to be the main female lead, came to visit her. She wore a black coat and Xixi smiled at her. But her smile was cold. "I'm not dead yet. You don't need to mourn for me." Sheng Wenyang didn't expect that. Although she went from a young wealthy miss to a criminal, she hadn't cried or anything. Instead, she had laughed. She helplessly said, "It seems like you knew you would have landed yourself a consequence like this when you had done those things in the past." Xixi's handcuffs bumped against the table and made a bang. She raised her chin and said, "Who would want to be in jail? Would you? But when I was doing those things, I wasn't thinking too much about it. Didn't you just want to be with Chen Xinan? I'll grant your wish. After all, you're the female lead that I've created. More or less, I have some feelings regarding you." Sheng Wenyang's expression changed. "What are you talking about? Many people think that I'm crazy, but I'm fully awake. Sheng Wenyang, let me tell you the truth. This world isn't real. This is a virtual world that is supported by the novel I had written." "Impossible. You find it to be unbelievable, right? But this is the truth. In my book, Chen Xinan is the typical romantic male lead. He is wealthy, handsome, and powerful. Many people love him, and you're one of the many. Of course, you're also the female lead. Male lead and female lead CP, male side lead and female side lead CP, etc. Mo Bei liked you without any reasons, and he couldn't control his love for you. I purposefully created him like this. You admired Chen Xinan, and this was a one-sided love. On another hand, you used Mo Bei to climb higher up the social ladder, and used him to get closer to Chen Xinan. Plus, you used Xin Haoyue's stupid cannon fodder methods, and successfully made yourself seem kind and innocent in front of Chen Xinan. But what was different from now, was that you were successful and became Lady Chen. You used the numerous miscarriages, and made Xin Haoyue your scapegoat. In the end, Xin Haoyue lost her entire family, and married a slag man, and then died in his hands. You and Chen Xinan had a son, 2 years after your marriage. There was your happy ending." Chen Xinan listened to her shocking and stunning words. Her face turned pale. You're crazy." "I'm not crazy." Xixi smiled and continued. "Do you need me to tell you what happened to your family from the start to end? Need me to tell you what happened between you and Mo Bei abroad?" "Sheng Wenyang, why do you think I found you in the first moments you returned back in the country? Why do you think I gave you advice? It's because I realized that because of Xin Haoyue, the plot had drastically changed. She wasn't the original Xin Haoyue from the book. She transmigrated earlier than me." You guys? So you guys are from another world? You're the author?" "Yes, you didn't expect this, right?" Xixi exaggeratingly laughed. "This world is quite interesting." "It's absurd." "It is absurd," Xixi chuckled. "But I'm not scared. This world will come to an end sooner or later. I am waiting for you guys to go to the underworld with me." "Ha!" Once Shi finished her words, she couldn't control her sinister laughter. Sheng Wenyang was stunned for a few moments, and she ended up escaping. She originally wanted to visit her and tell her that what comes around will come back around. In the end, she never expected Shi to say something absurd and ridiculous like that. So she was saying the truth? She wasn't Shi, and Xin Haoyue wasn't Xin Haoyue either. From the start, everyone was like a puppet living in this world. They were controlled and couldn't do anything they wanted. The more Sheng Wenyang thought of this, the more absurd it was. But this absurd thought tortured her day and night. In the end, she finally couldn't hold it in. She decided to call Chen Xinan and hoped to meet him. Chen Xinan didn't want to see her at all. "I'm busy," Sheng Wenyang hurriedly exclaimed. "I am free to talk anytime. Nan, I can wait for you." Chen Xinan seemed to be displeased by this endearment. When Sheng Wenyang heard no response, she was scared that he might reject her offer. She added, "It's about Xin Haoyue. Nan, I think you have the right to know." Chen Xinan raised his eyebrows slightly but gave her an address. He said, 4 in the afternoon. I will only give you 10 minutes. Okay. Sheng Wenyang grabbed her phone and thought, 10 minutes. It was enough. It was enough. As long as he agreed to see her. Sheng Wenyang's thoughts were on their meeting in the afternoon, so she seemed to be uneased in her office. In the end, she decided to go for a spa and then intentionally picked a pink dress that made her seem gorgeous but attractive at the same time. But Chen Xinan didn't even spare her a glance after he walked in. The makeup she spent a few hours doing went to waste. He cut straight to the chase and said, "Quickly say what you have to say." "I only have 10 minutes. After seeing Sheng Wenyang, he needed to see a few partners. After that, he needed to pick Xin Haoyue up." Sheng Wenyang, who had prepared a stomach full of gentle sentiments, was thrown off by his indifferent attitude. She stared at him with her wide and watery eyes. She blinked, and it felt like tears were about to pour out, but she needed to hold it in. "Nan? Miss Sheng, please change the way you address me." Chen Xinan pulled their distance apart again. Sheng Wenyang said, "Okay." Sheng Wenyang hesitated for a moment before agreeing. Then, she looked up bitterly at him and called out, "Mr. Chen." As soon as that unfamiliar greeting was let out, Sheng Wenyang's eyes turned red. They couldn't go back anymore. They really couldn't. Her Chen Xinan had long drifted further and further away. His heart was no longer with her at all, nor did his gaze pause on her anymore. Even the simple glance from before was something she was unable to keep. "Sheng Wenyang, you've lost. You've really lost to Xin Haoyue. Even if this world had been created for you and Chen Xinan from the start, you still lost." When Chen Xinan saw how pitiful she looked, biting her lip, he lost his temper instead. "Miss Sheng, please speak up if you have anything to say." Sheng Wenyang paused for a moment. Once she managed to swallow that lump in her throat, she began softly. "I went to see Shi. She told me that this world doesn't really exist, it's just a book she wrote. You and I are the male and female leads in this world, but because of Xin Haoyue, the orbit of this world had a dramatic change. So Nan, Xin Haoyue isn't even the real Xin Haoyue at all." Chen Xinan listened as she spat that all out while still retaining the air of a gentleman. Once he heard her shouting the name, Nan, he raised his brows slightly, and his pupils darkened. Sheng Wenyang immediately understood what went wrong and corrected herself. "Mr. Chen, everything I said is true." "Heh. If what you say is true, does that mean what Shi says must be true as well?" "Sheng Wenyang, you admit that you've been in contact with Shi, do you? So does that mean you're also involved with the things she did?" "No," Sheng Wenyang cried out immediately. "You have to believe me. Chen Xinan, please. Do you think I would have ended up investigating Shi if I weren't suspicious of you?" Chen Xinan stood up. "If you wish to continue on this madness with Shi, then you better think about the consequences. As for what you said earlier, I don't want to hear it a second time. I also do not want to hear it from anyone else. Miss Sheng, I hope your intelligence will not be dragged away by that imprisoned Shi. You better watch yourself." After he finished speaking, Chen Xinan got up. Sheng Wenyang quickly got up and chased after him, pulling his sleeve. "Chen Xinan, is it really impossible between us?" "It's impossible." His response to her was definite. Sheng Wenyang let go. She covered her face with her 2 hands and cried, sobbing so hard that she was no longer coherent. Gone, gone, everything is gone. She really couldn't get Chen Xinan back anymore. Sheng Wenyang cried her heart out, but she had no idea that a young man in a blue suit was watching the two of them from the railings on the 2nd floor, nor the fact that his gaze never left Sheng Wenyang's person. Not far away from him was Xin Haoyue, with her hair in a bun, dressed in a white shirt and a black pencil skirt. Xin Haoyue had invited Mobe to meet with her so they could talk about the show. Halfway through, he came out to pick up a call. Seeing that he had not returned despite waiting for quite a while, Xin Haoyue told his assistant she was going to the bathroom, but did not expect to see him leaning halfway over the railing, staring fixedly at a certain area downstairs, seeming extremely immersed. Among crowds, he always seemed to stand out. Without the need to look for him deliberately, she could still notice his traces at first glance into a crowd. Xin Haoyue was also looking curiously at where Sheng Wenyang were, except, unlike Mobe, her posture was clearly more relaxed, and her expression was also not as tight as his. From what she could see, Sheng Wenyang had likely come seeking out Chen Xinan to talk about the old times, then tried to find a way to pull Chen Xinan back after that. However, Chen Xinan must have shown no pity to the fairer sex and made the beauty cry. Xin Haoyue couldn't help but shake her head. She had to make Chen Xinan sleep in the guest room tonight. Who asked him to accept her appointment? After Mo Bei's complex gaze lingered on Chen Wenyang, who was sobbing with her shoulders shrunken for a moment, he finally said, "Host Chen, does this scene make you happy?" These words were filled with an explosive taste. Xin Haoyue came back to her senses. To him, Sheng Wenyang was someone he was afraid of doing wrong, even if he cared for her in the palm of his hand. Thus, she quickly put away her smile and responded simply, "My apologies, Mr. Mo. I do not have any intentions of feeling happy over someone's misfortune." Mo Bei stood there without moving and only turned around to look at her. "Even if you wish to, you have no right to do it." Xin Haoyue smiled and explained, "I am only smiling about something else. I have no intentions of making fun of Miss Sheng. As for being happy over someone's misfortune, I'm very sorry, but I really do not have that intention." "So Miss Xin, how does it feel to see your fiancé still entangled with his ex?" "Chen Xinan had no ex." Xin Haoyue corrected him. "He has never been together with her officially. If we had to name someone an ex, I would be the only possibility." Mo Bei's mouth moved, his lips curving into what seemed to be a smile. Xin Haoyue glanced at him and said after some thought, "If you really wish to obtain her to the point where you really can't bear to be without her, then isn't this situation good for you?" Taking advantage of this situation right now would be easy as cake. Mo Bei did not answer that question. Instead, he asked her, "So you really believe that Chen Xinan would not betray you and rekindle his old flame behind your back?" When she heard this question, Xin Haoyue could not help laughing. Following that, she said in a cheerful tone, "Then, do you really believe that Sheng Wenyang can rekindle that flame?" What Xin Haoyue got in response was Mo Bei's focused gaze. Xin Haoyue could guess his intentions and said, "You believe that, but I believe in Chen Xinan's character. If he really had someone he liked, he would never betray her. So, if he liked Sheng Wenyang, then he definitely would not get mixed up with me out of pretense. Similarly, he and I are about to be married. He definitely wouldn't give me up on our hard-won relationship. Mo Bei, I trust him because he can give me a sense of security. But you don't believe in Sheng Wenyang because your hearts aren't linked together. Perhaps, when you meet someone you truly love, and someone who truly loves you, you'll be able to experience that." After saying that, Xin Haoyue finally realized she may have been speaking too much and quickly said, "I've said too much, I'm sorry. About today? That's all right, it's a special experience, talking to you." After he said that, Mo Bei turned around and said, "I seem to be able to understand why Anan chose you over her." Xin Haoyue smiled and did not ask the reason. Instead, she said, "I hope you consider the interview. If it's possible, I hope I can receive an answer by tomorrow. Thank you." All right." Before Xin Haoyue left, she turned back just to glance at him and found him staring focusedly at the person downstairs. Xin Haoyue sighed silently and went downstairs with light feet. While reading her book, she actually quite admired Mo Bei. He was handsome, talented, and dedicated. It's just a pity that much of that is covered up by Chen Xinan's male lead aura. And because of his obsession with Sheng Wenyang, she just felt sorry for him. He was such a good man, and he deserved someone better to love him. He deserved happiness. Xin Haoyue felt a lot of emotions. After going downstairs, she was just thinking to drive home when she remembered Chen Xinan. So, she stopped her actions of reversing her car and gave him a call. Chen Xinan picked up after 2 beeps. "What is it?" Due to what happened with Mo Bei earlier, she felt a little affected by his emotions, so, when she spoke, her voice was softer than usual. "Have you gone back?" Chen Xinan's pupils paused. "Huh?" he said. The voice speaking with him became softer and softer. Xin Haoyue spoke a little powerlessly. "I saw you earlier." After she said that, she added on deliberately, "I saw you with Sheng Wenyang, so go sleep in the guest room tonight, President Chen." After she said that, she was just about to hang up when she heard Chen Xinan's slightly anxious voice from the receiver. "Where are you?" Xin Haoyue looked around her and told him where she was. "I'm in the parking lot." "Wait for me." After Chen Xinan said that, he immediately turned his car around and rushed back. Xin Haoyue did not expect that Chen Xinan would come this quickly. She had clearly shut her eyes to rest for a few short minutes after the call was hung up. Tap tap. Someone was knocking on the car window. When Xin Haoyue heard the sound, she turned around and saw Chen Xinan's handsome face, laced with a slight hint of anxiety. Xin Haoyue could not react to the situation for a moment, and did not move. Chen Xinan thought that she had gotten angry, so he tapped the window another 2 times and ordered, "Open the door." She was sitting on the driver's seat. Chen Xinan bent down to give her a glance, and immediately, she climbed over to the front passenger seat obediently. After Chen Xinan shut the door, his complexion seemed rather bad. He was gloomy, and also kept silent. Xin Haoyue observed his eyes carefully and thought she should have been the angry one. What is he being angry about? "Chen Xinan, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice revealing her slight irritation. "What's with this guy's aura? It's not like she's hiding a private lover." Chen Xinan turned around to look at her and still remained silent. Xin Haoyue snorted. Oh, President Chen, so you're gonna pull that look on me, are you? I haven't even asked you about meeting up with your ex, and you're angry at me? I'm not sleeping in the guest room. Chen Xinan sighed as he spoke in a solemn tone. Xin Haoyue, who was halfway through her sentence, was stunned. What? Chen Xinan looked intently at her. There's nothing between me and her. I was thinking of picking you up after your work and explain things to you, but since you happen to see us, I'll just explain everything while we're on the road. After he said that, Chen Xinan went on. But as for sleeping in the guest room, I strongly disagree with that suggestion. Xin Haoyue could not help but laugh out loud. While laughing, she said, If you're not sleeping there, then I will. Is that fine with you? No. I've never seen a couple who are about to get married sleep in different rooms. Xin Haoyue. So you still have reason? After Chen Xinan emphasized for the third time that he would not be sleeping in the guest room, Xin Haoyue no longer wanted to deal with him. He did not wait for her to respond either. Either way, no response means a yes by default. Chen Xinan started up her car, and only then did Xin Haoyue remind him. What about your car? I can just wait for Assistant Wang to come deal with it. Huh? Fine, whatever makes you happy. Xin Haoyue adjusted herself on her seat and looked out the window, letting her mind wander. With Mobei's attitude today, it was unlikely for him to agree to be on the show. It's likely that she will have to replan the show again tonight. Xin Haoyue was absorbed in her thoughts, having no idea at all that Chen Xinan, who was driving inattentively, had been glancing over to her several times without leaving any trace. By the time she finally caught him looking at her, she asked craftily, What are you looking at me like that for? What's with this situation? Is he going to talk or not? Chen Xinan clutched the steering wheel leisurely and said, The reason why I met up with Sheng Wenyang was because she went to see Shi several days ago. When Xin Haoyue heard this, a frown emerged on her brow. Chen Xinan caught those subtle movements and smiled, asking, Is there something you want to say to me? Xin Haoyue looked at him seriously and pondered deeply on it. Chen Xinan raised the corners of his mouth silently. There's something I've actually always wanted to ask you. Xin Haoyue seemed to be able to guess what he wanted to ask, so she brought it up first. About me? Yes. Actually, I've always been thinking about whether I should ask you this, because I can't be sure. How would you react if I asked you? That's why I never asked after so long. Chen Xinan went on and said, After Shi was taken into custody, I had Assistant Watt collect all of the videos on the scene. Later, I found many of what Shi had to say quite shocking. I'm not going to hide it from you, but I know everything about what she said to you when you went to see her as well. Xin Haoyue's gaze changed. So, after her meeting with Shi last time, that captain sent him a copy of the recording as well? Why? Do you not trust me or what? Chen Xinan explained. Many of Shi's actions are beyond our logic, but every time she sees you, she seems to become very agitated. Moreover, she only targets you. I'm just worried about you. Xin Haoyue shook her head. She said, So you met Sheng Wenyang today because she found out from Shi that I'm not the original Xin Haoyue? That's right. It's true, I'm not her. You should be clear about that as well. However, the reason why I didn't want to tell you that is because I think that statement is too ridiculous. I live in another world, so all the people I know in this world are from the contents of a book I've read before, transmigrating here. I accidentally fell down the stairs while going down and hit my head. By the time I woke up, I was already in this world. Chen Xinan, I know about all of you inside this world, and I also know how the story of this world is going to develop. That was why I tried to escape at the very beginning. When I tried to stay far away from you, I was only worried that I would destroy myself once I get close. Chen Xinan's gaze moved slightly, motioning for her to continue. I don't know from when Shi became the author. In this world, I am not the only person possessing Xin Haoyue's body. She is the same. She wrote this book, but I don't know why she turned into that. After thinking about it, the only possibility is because of me being in this world. She knows me and even hates me to no end. Otherwise, why would the supporting female lead have the same name as me? And she even ended up in a tragedy. Even though Chen Xinan could guess a few things from the dialogue between them, hearing her admit it herself still felt a little strange. So, what is the ending in the book? Xin Haoyue smiled. You and Sheng Wenyang got together, and because of an accidental miscarriage of your first child with Xin Haoyue, you got angry and made the Xin family perish. Meanwhile, because Xin Haoyue ended up getting married to that scumbag, she finally died on the day she was caught with another man. After some thought, Chen Xinan understood. So, that Lin Hui is the man she ended up marrying at the ending of the book? Xin Haoyue nodded. Chen Xinan no longer had anything to say. He just looked forward. If they had to talk about this, then it's better to make everything clear all at once. Xin Haoyue went on. The timeline in the book stops 2 years after your marriage. You had a child with Sheng Wenyang. Chen Xinan was silent. She continued, I don't know how much of what she said is real and how much of it is fake. If this world really is as she says, stopping 2 years after you get married, does that mean we only have 2 years of happiness together? That won't happen. Chen Xinan was certain. This world is real. I hope so as well. Xin Haoyue smiled. However, I often wake up feeling unsure whether I'm actually in this world or the other one. I've even wondered, what if we just never got married? Will the world never end if we keep going like this? But I couldn't do that to you, Chen Xinan. I want to walk by your side as your official wife. Even if it's only 2 years, I'll still feel blessed. The car stopped. Chen Xinan heard her say, no matter what happens in the future, meeting you and loving you is already enough for me. As for our future, let's just leave that up to God to decide, okay? We'll definitely stay together until we grow old. Chen Xinan took her hand and leaned over to pull her into his arms. He lowered his head down and kissed her on the lips before saying in a soft voice, don't think too much about it. Xin Haoyue looked up with her eyes glistening with tears. You won't feel disgusted with me because of this, will you? Chen Xinan hugged her, brooding. If I do, can I still return you right now? When she heard that, Xin Haoyue knew that he was just teasing her. So without any thought, she said, no, anyway, after our wedding at the end of April, I'll be latching on to you. Don't even think about throwing me aside in your lifetime. Yeah, even if you're a heavy burden, I won't throw you away. How am I heavy? What's more, when have I ever made you worry? Chen Xinan looked at her. You don't think so? Who's the one making me worry every day? Xin Haoyue wouldn't admit it. She was clearly a very independent person. You see, she works hard, earns her own money, and is a clingy. Anyway, that person wasn't me. Chen Xinan chuckled softly. He no longer said anything else to her, and instead, holding her face, he kissed her deeply. On the other hand, Sheng Wenyang, who had seen Chen Xinan enter Xin Haoyue's car, was standing in place, not moving, even after a long time had passed. Did you see that? The two of them have a close relationship. Mo Bei's deep voice emerged. Sheng Wenyang did not turn around to look at him. Her gaze just followed the car as it left. She laughed self-deprecatingly and asked, did you come just so you could laugh at me? Is that what you think? Mo Bei frowned. Am I wrong? Shamelessly, I thought I was Chen Xinan's girlfriend at the start, but who knew that he didn't think about me in that way at all? Look, in those years when I went overseas, Xin Haoyue had already replaced me completely. It's all my own fault. When Mo Bei heard her words, he laughed at himself as well. Why would he be so immersed in her at the beginning, thinking of her as someone so excellent and charming? Even till now, the only person who can't come to terms with reality is just herself. Wenyang, let it go. Chen Xinan loves Xin Haoyue. Enough. Sheng Wenyang suddenly raised her voice and turned around to yell at him nastily. Even if you like me, so what? Do you think you can stab my heart over and over again with your words just because you like me? Mo Bei, why can't you just support me and understand me? I love Chen Xinan. I love him more than I love myself. Even if you want me to stop loving me, you should give me some time to forget him. Stop forcing me, Mo Bei. I feel like I'm going to break soon. I can't take it anymore. Mo Bei looked at her, and his eyes turned red. Before he could say anything, he saw her running to her own car, getting in, and drove off. The scene almost looked like she was running away. Mo Bei stood there for a long time. When his phone suddenly rang, he finally came back to his senses. The caller ID on the phone was minor. Mo Bei reached his hand up to massage his temples and picked up the call, only to hear a clear and pleasant voice on the other end that was slightly pitched. Mo Bei, there's an English paragraph I can't understand. Can you translate it for me, please? The please at the very end had been deliberately dragged on, bringing with it a feeling of sweetness. Mo Bei was dazed for a moment before finally asking, what does it say? The person on the other side immediately read out the paragraph with a giggle. The furthest distance in the world is not between life, but when I stand in front of you, yet you don't know that I love you. As soon as that soft voice finished speaking, the person on that end added on quickly. What does that paragraph mean? Mo Bei, help me translate it. Mo Bei smiled. Only then did he say, I'm quite curious myself. How could someone who is able to read the pronunciations of each word so accurately not know its meaning in Chinese? If you really don't understand, I don't mind having a chat with your parents later and tell them to hire an English tutor for you. The person on the other side deflated. After a sigh, a voice filled with complaints could be heard. Fine, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. No need to be uppity about it. After that, without even waiting for his response, she threw him out a sentence in a huff. Mo Bei, I don't want to see you anymore. Hateful guy. Mo Bei looked at the call that had been cut and felt helpless. Even if she says that, she would still appear in front of him, cheerful and jumping in joy. So what's there to worry about? Why should he care? April arrived. The day of Chen Xinan and Xin Haoyue's wedding was getting closer and closer. The guests they had to invite to the wedding, as well as the other matters, were left to Chen Xinan and their seniors. Xin Haoyue was only responsible for choosing out the wedding dress and taking sweet and loving wedding photos with Chen Xinan for the afternoon. Both of them were extremely uninterested in taking photos, so they had only changed twice during the entire thing. One was the pure white Western wedding dress, while the other was the more dignified, traditional Chinese wedding costume. The clothes were all custom-made by the well-known designers hired by Chen Xinan. The designs were fashionable, noble, and elegant, all at the same time. Due to her work, Xin Haoyue had a strong feel for the camera. Adding on the high face value of the two of them, It wasn't only the workers at the scene who were enthralled by their photo shoot, even the photographer was praising, truly impeccable. After it ended, the photographer was still persuading them pitifully. President Chen, do you and your wife really not plan to take a few more pictures? You're both so handsome, so beautiful. You should take more pictures. It's too much of a waste if you don't. On the other hand, Chen Xinan looked at Xin Haoyue. Xin Haoyue knew that he was asking for her opinion, so she shook her head. Forget it, I'm tired. When he heard that, Chen Xinan reached out to hold her, allowing her to learn into his embrace. Compliantly, he said, all right, let's stop here then. I'll bring you back in so you can rest. Avoiding the gazes of the others, she secretly gave him a strong pinch at the waist and raised her eyes to glare at him. She was still a little angry. Her energy is drained today, and it was all because of him. Last night, when she reminded him several times not to leave any marks at her neck, he did remember that, but he still made sure to toss her about well enough. They clearly had to take their wedding photos today, but he still pestered her deep into the night. When she got up this morning, she found herself very dull and groggy. Chen Xinan held her all the way to the changing room so she could change. When he saw that she was still in low spirits, he reflected on it for a moment and asked in worry, are you tired? Xin Haoyue glanced at him from the corner of her eye. Aren't you? Chen Xinan smiled. Mrs. Chen, are you giving me an invitation to work myself harder? This person. Xin Haoyue reached out to push him. Go away, I'm going to change. Didn't you say you were tired? I'll help you change, Mrs. Chen. Why thank you, but I wouldn't dare bother you. Of course, Xin Haoyue wouldn't dare to send herself right into the wolf's mouth. If she really let him change her, then would she still be able to walk out the dressing room, alive? After the two finished packing up and was about to head back, Bai Ning called Xin Haoyue and asked the two to come over for dinner. Xin Haoyue asked Chen Xinan, and naturally, Chen Xinan had no comments about it. And so, they changed routes and headed to the Xin family house instead. Ever since staying the night at Chen Xinan's place, Xin Haoyue spent much of her time living there, because Chen Xinan would come to pick her up any time it was convenient for him. But of course, the elders all knew what was going on. They just didn't expose them. Not long after Xin Haoyue went in and sat down, she couldn't help but yawn. She was really sleepy. She looked fine a few days ago when Bai Ning last saw her, but now, seeing how tired she was, she asked in pity, have you been busy at work? Your wedding's coming up soon. You should take time off work if you're really too tired. Having the best idea on why she was so tired, Xin Haoyue quickly responded, work is fine, Mom. I just didn't sleep well last night. We had to take our wedding photos today as well, so I got a bit more tired than usual. I'm fine, Mom. I'll take some time off near the end of April and get ready for the wedding. Bai Ning wasn't too sure about that. Your work is important, but your health is more important than that. I know, Mom. Don't worry. Chen Xinan reached out to hold her hand. With a smile, he assured Bai Ning, don't worry, Mom. I'll take good care of her. Only then did Bai Ning nod. But she still exhorted, pay attention to your rest. Mom, you and Dad are the same. You don't have to worry about me and brother. Your healths are more important. When she heard her mentioning Xin Chancheng, she felt a little disappointed. I still don't know when your brother's going to take an interest in dating. Why don't you take a few female friends home and see? You don't have to worry about him, Mom. You think brother won't be able to get any girl with his qualifications? I'm just worried that his taste is higher than that. I don't remember him taking fancy in any girl he's seen yet. Mom? Xin Haoyue was about to enlighten her when she heard Xin Chancheng's voice. I'm home, Mom. Done with work? Bai Ning asked in response. Yeah? After responding, Xin Chancheng finally saw Chen Xinan and Xin Haoyue. The former gave him a light nod. Xin Chancheng took off his suit jacket and did not show too much a reaction to that. On the other hand, Xin Haoyue said to him with a cheerful smile, Brother, Mom was just talking about when you're going to find me a sister-in-law. When Xin Chancheng heard the gloating in her tone, his eyes motioned for her to watch herself as he scolded her softly. You can keep quiet. Xin Haoyue's smile turned even brighter. Brother, why don't I keep an eye out for some women your age and help set you up? You can stop talking now. When Xin Haoyue saw his moody expression, she stopped. When Xin Chancheng passed by where Chen Xinan was sitting, he gave him a quiet reminder. Better watch your wife, my sister. When Chen Xinan heard that, he laughed. I think she's quite nice like that. Xin Haoyue was sitting right beside him, so naturally, she heard it clearly. Proudly, she looked at Xin Chancheng and said, He's on my side, brother. Xin Chancheng rolled his eyes away from her. He wasn't going to lower herself to her level. During dinner, the family shared a cheerful meal in harmony. But of course, that was besides Xin Chancheng, who was a little gloomy from not being able to escape Bai Ning's constant persuasions at the dinner table. After dinner, Chen Xinan and Xin Jin were seated in the living room, watching the news. Xin Haoyue helped Bai Ning clean up the tableware and brought a plate of cut fruits to the living room. Since she still couldn't get over her sleepiness, she went upstairs to take a shower. She had just planned to take a short nap, but she didn't expect herself to fall deep asleep. When she woke up, she found Chen Xinan sitting right at the side of her bed, reaching his hand out, stroking her cheek. Xin Haoyue opened her sleepy eyes and mumbled, What time is it? It's 10:30 at night. Oh, only then did Xin Haoyue react to the situation. She said in surprise, I actually slept that long? Yeah, just like a little piggy. You're a pig? Xin Haoyue slapped away his hand that was rubbing her earlobe and muttered, that's ticklish. Chen Xinan withdrew his hand and leaned over to kiss her lips. Go back to sleep. I'll head back now. Okay? After saying that, Xin Haoyue wanted to get up and see him off, but Chen Xinan stopped her. I can go down myself. Remember to cover yourself while you're sleeping. Xin Haoyue answered gloomily, I will. But she had just kicked off her blanket once when it got too hot at night. How did she become someone who liked taking off the blankets? Moreover, it was him who insisted on holding her tightly while they slept. His body had a high temperature, and she wanted to push him, but he was too heavy. What else could she have done besides kicking off the blanket? Xin Haoyue couldn't be bothered to explain herself, so she just told him, be careful while you're driving back by yourself. Before leaving, Chen Xinan pulled her in for a deep kiss, reluctant to go. Only then did he let her go and left by himself. The next day, Xin Haoyue went off to work, refreshed. When her colleagues saw her, all of them were saying that to each other, that people who were waiting for their big day were all in high spirits after all. Xin Haoyue could only pull up an awkward smile. There wasn't much she could say. Soon, she received a notice regarding an event about the inheritance of Chinese culture. She was specially invited to be the host. Xin Haoyue looked at the contents of the program and felt that it was very meaningful. Thus she agreed. Only, due to how soon the event was going to start, she would have to rush over tomorrow. She was packing her luggage when she brought this up to Chen Xinan at night. Chen Xinan was leaning on the dresser, watching her get busy with packing up her stuff, his expression profound. Once Xin Haoyue was done talking, he still remained quiet for quite a long while. So she added on, I'll be back very soon. It's only 4 days. Without a change in his expression, Chen Xinan said, you're a bride-to-be and you're still running all over the place? Xin Haoyue knew that he could want for nothing more than to stick around her all day long, so she walked to him with a smile and hugged his waist, putting on the coy act. Who told my hubby to be so capable? Chen Xinan narrowed his eyes slightly. Xin Haoyue went up on the tips of her toes and gave him a hard kiss on the lips to curry favor. I won't be running around once I'm back. I'll stay here and wait for our wedding, okay? Chen Xinan raised his arms up to hold her delicate waist. Then, turning around, he pressed her to the wall. Planting his hand on the wall beside her, he caressed her cheek and said in a deep, seductive tone, call me that again. Xin Haoyue smiled proudly. However, instead of complying, she raised her smooth and fair arms, curling them around his neck, and stuck close to his ear on purpose, asking, when are we going to get our certificate? She knew that he had been very busy recently at the office due to the wedding, coupled with how he still had to find time out of his day to accompany her each day. He had been so busy he never got to mention taking a trip to the Civil Affairs Bureau. If it wasn't for her having heard 2 of her colleagues gossiping while she was in the bathroom today, saying, I don't know how many lifetimes worth of luck that Xin Haoyue has used up, but to think she could marry a golden bachelor like Chen Xinan. No use being envious. She's a lucky one for sure. But let's not jump to conclusions too early. What if they don't actually get married? And even if she does, a divorce is still possible. You're right. Anyway, taking a trip down to the Civil Affairs Bureau and getting the document is super easy as well. We'll have to see if she has the ability to keep her spot as a Mrs. Rich. Heh, just wait and see. After the voices of the 2 got farther and farther, Xin Haoyue came out. She didn't feel angry about this, though. They're speaking with their own mouths. They can be envious about people however they want with them. However, they actually reminded her that, since proposing, it seems like Chen Xinan had not mentioned about getting their marriage certificates this whole time. Xin Haoyue's idea was simple. If he wasn't going to bring it up, then she's just going to ask. When Chen Xinan heard that, he ended up laughing instead. Finally feeling anxious, Xin Haoyue. So are you still going on that business trip? Xin Haoyue. This and that are 2 different things, all right? Chen Xinan leaned down and chuckled. If you don't worry about me anymore, you might lose me someday. But Xin Haoyue wasn't worried at all. Whoever wants you can take you. I have no comments. After she said that, she pulled him down by his collar and threatened. However, if you really try to leave, I'd probably never want you again for the rest of my life. Chen Xinan just raised his lips in a smile. Following that, he lowered his head to catch her lips, sucking down on them. Xin Haoyue was getting breathless from the kiss, and her shirt was disheveled. She wrapped one leg around his waist and allowed him to do as he pleased. Only, even after her body had gone soft and covered in sweat, he still kept rubbing on her when she was feeling empty, not at all giving her the joyful relief she wanted. Xin Haoyue rubbed against his body uncomfortably and opened her misty eyes to look at him, only to see the tense look on his face with his forehead dripping with sweat. His eyes were like burning flames as he asked in a hoarse voice, Do you want me? Then, he kissed her all the way down from her clavicle. Xin Haoyue whined, and finally she could no longer hold herself back from saying, Yes. Xin Haoyue needed to travel because of her work, so Chen Xinan absorbed himself in pushing forward all the key schedules he had laid out for him next month to these next few days. He worked overtime every day, holding meetings, working, and engaging in social activities. But such a crazy way of working was actually quite similar to when he first took over the company. And recently, Assistant Want, who had recently fallen in love with the goddess of his university during a party last time, was troubled. Why did his wonderful days of getting off work on time end right after the boss lady went on a business trip? Assistant Wang felt bitter, but he had to accompany Chen Xinan while he worked overtime. After 2 or 3 days, he secretly sent a message to Xin Haoyue, asking her when she was going to return under the pretense of concern. Xin Haoyue, who was currently packing up her luggage after finishing up her work, responded to the message after seeing it. Is anything wrong, Assistant Wang? Is Chen Xinan looking for me? Assistant Wang responded cleverly. Madam, President Chen has been mentioning all day about when you're going to come back. When Xin Haoyue saw the message, she couldn't help but smile. Then she gave Chen Xinan a call and brought it up bluntly. I'm heading back by plane this afternoon. Chen Xinan was looking through some documents when he heard that, and the corners of his lips couldn't help but widen. But when he responded to her, his voice was still relatively calm. All right, be careful. I'll come pick you up when you've arrived. Okay. Xin Haoyue had wanted to say more, but for a moment, she didn't know where to start. But when she hung up, she felt pretty happy. Yeah, just hearing his voice alone made her happy. Moreover, she'll be able to see him soon. After sitting impatiently in his office for a few hours, Chen Xinan put on his suit jacket at 5 in the afternoon and grabbed his car keys, ready to head out to pick up his wife. Assistant Wang happened to be coming in with documents for him, but when he saw his actions, he asked, President Chen, are you getting off? Yeah. Chen Xinan looked at him and said, hand me the documents. Assistant Wang was feeling giddy. Does this mean he doesn't have to work overtime today? After signing the documents, Chen Xinan ordered him, tonight's dinner is cancelled. Assistant Wang could guess that the boss lady must have returned, so he quickly said, yes, President Chen. His boss, who had been working overtime every day for several days in a row, is finally getting off work early. Many of his colleagues in the office were relieved. One of them secretly asked Assistant Wang for the gossip. Assistant Wang, why did President Chen get off so early today? Assistant Wang gave her a deep look. Don't talk too much if you can't figure it out. Defeated, his colleague did not dare to talk anymore. On the other hand, Assistant Wang was walking back to his own office at a brisk pace. He finally held out. He can finally get off work and see his girlfriend. After picking up his wife from the airport, Chen Xinan brought her to dinner as well. After heading back, he didn't even wait for Xin Haoyue to wash off the dust from her body before carrying her into the bedroom. The next day, Xin Haoyue slept until noon before getting up. When Chen Xinan received her little gaze that was filled with complaints, he said thoughtfully, I helped you take the day off. Xin Haoyue was a little unhappy. I've been out on a business trip for so many days, there's still a lot of work piled up at the station. Chen Xinan chuckled. So, is your work more important than me? Xin Haoyue put her arms around him instantly. How are they comparable? Chen Xinan huffed to show his dissatisfaction. In order to celebrate the fact that the two of them finally got their marriage certificate, the two families met up to share a lively dinner. While they ate, the topic drew further and further. Several of the seniors have even went on to discuss the name of their child and even described what the child would look like. When they saw how enthusiastic these seniors were while they discussed the topic, Xin Haoyue felt quite helpless. To have a child? Isn't it a bit early to talk about this right now? Before the wedding, Xin Haoyue tried her best and completed all her work because, after the marriage, she still had to take a month off to go on her honeymoon. Actually, Xin Haoyue wasn't in high support of it when Chen Xinan mentioned the idea of going on a honeymoon, mainly because of their work. She asked him, will it really be fine for you to take a month off with your two companies? In the joint efforts of he and Mao Xiwan, his new company had grown to a considerable scale, which was quite amazing in the industry. But Chen Xinan wasn't the least bit perturbed. I have so many subordinates under me. If the company can't run as usual just because I'm off for a month, then that means I don't have a good eye for people. Xin Haoyue was speechless. Do people normally go around boasting like this? Chen Xinan immediately understood the deeper meanings of her words and said, I've already talked to your higher-ups about your work. We can deal with whatever arises once we come back. Even though Xin Haoyue was reluctant, she still went with it. A honeymoon, what wonderful memories you could make. How could you not go? 2 days before the wedding, Zheng Qin and Gu Tong invited Xin Haoyue out, and the three of them went out to have some crazy fun together. They had way too much fun, and by the time they headed their separate ways, it was already 1 in the morning. The three of them drank alcohol, and the most drunk out of the three was Zheng Qin. But besides constantly feeling the need to bust out a tune every so often after getting drunk, she had no other strange habits. On the contrary, Gu Tong ended up crying very hard after she got drunk, and naturally, the contents of her crying were all related to Xia Chao. Even though Xin Haoyue still remained sober, her feet still felt light when she walked. She heard Gu Tong, who was tugging at her sleeve, asking sentence after sentence. Haoyue, tell me, why are there such cold men in this world? I've already been so proactive and made myself so obvious, but he still acts so indifferent. Xiao, you're really formidable. Chen Xinan listened to what she said and couldn't help but ask, so if you chased after me and I didn't immediately agree, would you also back out as well? Xin Haoyue quickly waved her hands. Of course not. I wouldn't chase after you. Only people who want to have a bad time would take the initiative to go after you. You're like a flower on top of a mountain. You can't just climb up and pick it. You have to wait for it to come into your arms by itself. After hearing this, Chen Xinan didn't know what sort of expression he should have. Forget it. It's better to just coax her to bed. The more he talked with her, the more he felt like he was going to give himself internal injuries. It really wasn't the wise choice to speak with her on this topic. A wedding as grand as this had not been seen in Shenzhen City for more than a few decades now. The entourage following along the groom's car to pick up the bride had formed an extensive line like a long dragon. You could hardly see the tail end even if you squinted your eyes from the front. There were many onlookers around, and even the cameras following their movements were countless. The air was filled with joy and sweetness, all the way from the groom heading over to the bride's house and pick her up towards the formal wedding event itself. Everyone attending the wedding were wealthy people. However, none of them dared to cause a disturbance in Chen Xinan's presence. This was with the exception of Zhuang Jie, of course. After making the groom drink a few glasses of alcohol, he knew that Chen Xinan babied Xin Haoyue. Once he was done with all the guest tables, he would help her drink half of the alcohol. So after doing some thinking, he decided not to tease the bride. On the other hand, both the bridesmaids, Gu Tong and Zhang Jin, both helped her deal with a lot of the drinking. When she saw that the two of them were starting to appear slightly off halfway through the guest tables, only then did Xin Haoyue had Chen Xinan help out a little. The two of them were able to evade the many guests coming to ask for a toast this way. After the event, besides being enraptured with endless joy, Xin Haoyue had also felt bottomless exhaustion. At night, when everyone was finished playing around at the nuptial chamber, their new house finally quieted down. Xin Haoyue plopped herself down on the bed, without even taking off her dress, and said tiredly, I finally understand why people say that getting married is draining. She had gotten up before the sun rose, just to get her makeup done. Now that she was at the end of the entire process, her body felt like it could collapse at any moment. Chen Xinan listened to what she said and couldn't help but ask, so if you chased after me and I didn't immediately agree, would you also back out as well? Xin Haoyue quickly waved her hands. Of course not. I wouldn't chase after you. Only people who want to have a bad time would take the initiative to go after you. You're like a flower on top of a mountain. You can't just climb up and pick it. You have to wait for it to come into your arms by itself. After hearing this, Chen Xinan didn't know what sort of expression he should have. Forget it. It's better to just coax her to bed. The more he talked with her, the more he felt like he was going to give himself internal injuries. It really wasn't the wise choice to speak with her on this topic. A wedding as grand as this had not been seen in Shenzhen City for more than a few decades now. The entourage following along the groom's car to pick up the bride had formed an extensive line like a long dragon. You could hardly see the tail end even if you squinted your eyes from the front. There were many onlookers around, and even the cameras following their movements were countless. The air was filled with joy and sweetness, all the way from the groom heading over to the bride's house and pick her up towards the formal wedding event itself. Everyone attending the wedding were wealthy people. However, none of them dared to cause a disturbance in Chen Xinan's presence. This was with the exception of Zhuang Jie, of course. After making the groom drink a few glasses of alcohol, he knew that Chen Xinan babied Xin Haoyue. Once he was done with all the guest tables, he would help her drink half of the alcohol. So after doing some thinking, he decided not to tease the bride. On the other hand, both the bridesmaids, Gu Tong and Zhang Jin, both helped her deal with a lot of the drinking. When she saw that the two of them were starting to appear slightly off halfway through the guest tables, only then did Xin Haoyue had Chen Xinan help out a little. The two of them were able to evade the many guests coming to ask for a toast this way. After the event, besides being enraptured with endless joy, Xin Haoyue had also felt bottomless exhaustion. At night, when everyone was finished playing around at the nuptial chamber, their new house finally quieted down. Xin Haoyue plopped herself down on the bed without even taking off her dress and said tiredly, I finally understand why people say that getting married is draining. She had gotten up before the sun rose just to get her makeup done. Now that she was at the end of the entire process, her body felt like it could collapse at any moment. But still, she had to admit that when he mouthed the tender-filled words, I do to her, she was undeniably smitten. Starting today, she would officially be recognized as Mrs. Chen. Now the two of them will be there for each other at their lowest, and they would go hand in hand till they grew old. Chen Xinan, Xin Haoyue turned around and sat upright to watch her husband. The latter was currently taking off his white suit. She couldn't help but say with a big smile, "You look really handsome in a white suit." Chen Xinan's actions stopped for a brief moment. Instead of continuing what he was doing, he then began walking towards her, and with a smile, held her face and gave her a kiss. Xin Haoyue wanted to avoid his sudden attack but failed to do so. She mumbled, "I still haven't wiped off my lipstick." When he heard this, Chen Xinan rubbed his finger over her lower lip. As expected, the tip of his finger was covered in red. However, when he saw that proud smile on her face, he neared his face once more with a chuckle, and deliberately nibbled on her lips, laughing softly. "I don't mind." The two of them laughed together, and when they finally separated, both their breaths were very unsteady. It wasn't hard to see that Chen Xinan was in a pretty good mood today. Since many guests came to them for a toast, and he never refused any of them, he even gulped down a considerable amount of her portion of drinks. Xin Haoyue reached out to stroke his handsome face. The warmth on her hand was extremely comfortable. When the slightly strong stench of alcohol on him wafted in her nose, she reached out and pushed him on the chest. "Go wash up." Chen Xinan placed both his two hands at her sides and kept his eyes firmly on her. He had an unceasing smile on his face. He playfully invited her. "Let's go in together?" Xin Haoyue pondered on it for a moment, but gave him a firm refusal in the end. "Let's not." If they really went in together, then he definitely wouldn't just let her go without messing around inside the bathroom for a bit. However, Chen Xinan, who clearly had too much to drink, was clearly very intent on this idea. He moved his hand down beneath her waist and carried her up. It was evident he wasn't accepting any refusal from her. He said, "We're going in together." "Hey, Chen Xinan, I haven't even taken off my dress yet." Xin Haoyue slapped his arm to remind him. She wore a red chipal for the wedding today. The lifelike embroidery of the dragons and phoenixes on her were very exquisite. This dress caught her eye at the very first glance, when she went and picked out what to wear for this occasion. This was why she was worried that these clothes might get torn apart under his hands when they entered the bathroom. After all, there was a lot of precedence to take note of. When he heard what she said, Chen Xinan stopped moving and looked down to observe the fastened knots on her dress. His eyes then trailed over to the revealed section of her delicate legs. Suddenly, he turned to a different direction, and while walking he said, "If you hadn't reminded me, I would have forgotten that you wore a chipal similar to that one ceremony at a uni, as well as when you hid out in a city." However, at that time, the chipal she wore had a shorter skirt and a higher slit. The deepest impression he had remembered of that time when he saw her in that dress was how he pressed her down, more impulsive than usual. He tore the dress and let her wrap her long, fair legs around his own body. Even though that idea had already been realized many times in the past, but today was a special day for them. Chen Xinan's plan for tonight was that he definitely wouldn't let her rest early. And so, Xin Haoyue, who was suddenly pressed up against the wall, raised her head up with difficulty. She felt the sensation of him burying his head down at her chest, biting down on each button to loosen the knots. With how meticulous his movements were, she finally understood something. No wonder Chen Xinan was always so fast at unbuttoning her clothes, because even the speed of him doing it with only his teeth was terrifying. Xin Haoyue reached out to stroke his short hair that had been specially groomed for today. When she found that he was deliberately giving a nibble at the front of her fair chest, she played a trick on him as well, and made a mess out of his handsome hairdo. Naturally, Chen Xinan noticed how she ruffled his head. He raised his eyes to give her a heavy look. Xin Haoyue was startled by the raw look in his eyes, one that was filled with desire. With her body trembling now, Chen Xinan immediately drew an upward curve on his lips. "What's wrong? Did you finally realize that you're in trouble?" Xin Haoyue raised her head, sneering at him. "As if I am." "Are you really sure?" After he said this, Chen Xinan put on an intense smile as he reached his hand inside of her split skirt. Xin Haoyue couldn't help but cry out uncomfortably, but despite this, she didn't forget to interrogate him. "Chen Xinan, tell me honestly, have you ever been with any other woman before me? Someone you haven't told me about?" When Chen Xinan heard this, he licked her earlobe on purpose and responded leisurely in a magnetic voice. "Didn't you say you knew everything? How could you not know who my first woman was?" While Xin Haoyue felt his naughty hands move about on her entire body, her hands slid down weakly. As she held onto his arm, she couldn't utter out a proper sentence anymore. Wait, I can't wait anymore." With her clothes torn open, Xin Haoyue only had time to give the ragged dress one last pitiful glance. But soon after, she realized that, compared to this outfit, she herself was no more lucky than it. After the night passed, she suffered the consequences of being tossed about the entire time. The result of this was that she got up late the next day. Then she still had to drag her lifeless limbs and sore waist home to see the elders. After performing the tea ceremony and accepting the wedding gifts from her seniors, she couldn't hold on any longer. Once she finally returned back to Chen Xinan's room, her body dropped on the bed and her consciousness disappeared. She slept like she was dead. When she woke up, she noticed that the sky was already dark. and so she went downstairs and passed by the kitchen. But because of this, she happened to have heard Wang Yinling say to Chen Xinan inside, I know you're young and vigorous, and that you like to fool around, but Xin Haoyue is just beginning to get used to this. You have to learn to hold back a bit. You can't just mess around without giving her any time to rest. Xin Haoyue, who was accidentally eavesdropping on them, flushed instantly. When she entered through the bedroom last night, Chen Xinan had practically carried her in. And with how she threw everything aside to sleep for so long, there's no way their wise elders wouldn't know what was going on. Even though she herself knew what was going to happen, but with how obvious it was to those around them, it was still really embarrassing. Everything is Chen Xinan's fault. On the other hand, Chen Xinan, who was slowly cutting potatoes inside, responded to them. Don't you, Grandpa and Dad, have always said that you wanted grandchildren? I'm just giving you a chance to get one really quickly. Wang Yinlin really had no idea how cheeky her son was. Oh, you. Xin Haoyue's face was even redder now since she heard this. After clearing her throat, she called out to her, Mom. As soon as she heard her daughter's voice, Wang Yinlin turned around to look at the newlywed bride. With a smile, she said, You're awake, Haoyue. You're just in time. Aunt Song's soup is just about done. You should drink more of it later. It's good for you. Thank you, Mom. After Xin Haoyue responded with a smile, she turned to look at Chen Xinan. Her eyes obviously revealed her dissatisfaction. How could he have the guts to just say such things? Chen Xinan wiped his hands and walked towards her. We're going to have a fine meal tonight. Even though Mom hasn't cooked for years, she's willing to cook up a storm just for you. Xin Haoyue was quite surprised. She never expected that this fierce-looking woman named Wang Yinlin would actually have such a homely side to her outside of work. Let me help you with some dishes, Mom. It's fine. I'll be done after this one. You must be tired. Go rest in the living room. When Xin Haoyue saw Wang Yinlin's gaze that insinuated, I know how you young people are, her face couldn't help but blush up. Once they were done cleaning up after dinner, Xin Haoyue and Chen Xinan watched TV for a while with their grandfather. Suddenly, the old man said that his fingers were itching to play some chess again, so he asked Xin Haoyue, My granddaughter-in-law, do you know how to play chess? Xin Haoyue blinked her eyes before asking him, What type of chess, Grandpa? Chinese chess or 5 in row? Why not both? Grandpa Chen suggested. Xin Haoyue paused for a moment thinking about something. She then responded back, Oh, sure. I'll go get the chess set from the study. After Xin Haoyue ran upstairs, Chen Xinan, who was sitting on the center of the sofa, turned his gaze over to give the old man a glance. The meaning behind his eyes was very clear. Grandpa Chen rocked his chair and laughed when he noticed this. It's truly nice to have a granddaughter-in-law. At the very least, I have a chess partner now. Chen Xinan sighed and made a small comment. You should hold back a little, old man. Grandpa Chen laughed once more. Since I can't mess with my own grandson, then playing around with my granddaughter-in-law seems rather quite fun. On the other hand, Xin Haoyue, who didn't think too much of it, brought the chess set over. Once she finished setting up the game and played for a few moves with Grandpa Chen, she found that she was unable to hold on. She had also played chess with Chen Xinan before. However, both Grandpa Chen and Chen Xinan were completely different players. If she put on a spoiled or cute act against Chen Xinan, then she could get him to go easy on her like that. Moreover, he tended to be gentle with her in chess. He wasn't at all like Grandpa Chen, who exposed his murderous aura in just a short amount of time. Since Xin Haoyue wasn't very good at chess, it didn't really take her long to fall to a tragic end. It was almost as if Grandpa Chen was checking out her skill level. When they moved on to 5 in row, he clearly changed his tactics, almost as if he was slowly dicing her up slice after slice. These chess games were amazingly excruciating for Xin Haoyue, and several times she would look over to Chen Xinan, her pitiful eyes asking him for help. Chen Xinan could only scold her helplessly. You idiot. Just as he was about to teach her a few tricks, Grandpa Chen at the side stopped him immediately. Hey, no talking during chess. Chen Xinan's eyes swept over to the proud Grandpa Chen, and then at his own wife. He could only endure this torturous moment with her. Every so often, he would reach out to hold her hand, stroking it with his fingers. At the end, when Xin Haoyue's entire army was annihilated, she finally let out a sigh of relief. Grandpa Chen laughed and said, It's been a long time since I've played chess with someone so bad at it. You should play some chess with me more in the future. Xin Haoyue helplessly agreed with a smile on her face, but when she was about to pack up the chess set, she didn't expect that Chen Xinan would suddenly say, Old man, let's play a few games. When he heard this, Grandpa Chen was overjoyed. Sure, come on. Ever since he took over the company, Chen Xinan had been coming home less and less. There was no need to even mention of him having the time to play a calming game of chess with his grandfather. And so, Grandpa Chen rubbed his hands together, clearly ready for a fight. But in just a few minutes, Xin Haoyue sat wide-eyed at the completely one-sided chess game. Chen Xinan stood up and spoke like he didn't even break a sweat. Let's go, my wife. It's time for us to sleep. Grandpa Chen's face was dark. Meanwhile, Xin Haoyue was stunned. Chen Xinan, thank you for your grace last time. Chen Xinan huffed to show his dissatisfaction. However, Xin Haoyue didn't care. After she was done eating, she went upstairs to get changed. But halfway through it, Chen Xinan barged his way in. He leaned against the doorway, and while watching her continue changing, he spoke leisurely. After you're done, let's go and get our stuff settled. Xin Haoyue first finished putting on her clothes, and as she was fixing up her hair, she asked him, Settle what? Chen Xinan responded calmly, Our marriage certificate. Xin Haoyue, who was busy trying to tie her hair, paused midway. She turned around and looked at him. So you're saying, we're going to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get our certificate? He silently smiled at her. If we don't get it at the Civil Affairs Bureau, then where else should we get it? After she heard this, Xin Haoyue couldn't help her mouth from forming a wide smile. She quickly replied, My family's household register is with my parents. Then we can get it from father and mother-in-law later. Okay? Xin Haoyue stared at him. The smile on her face didn't show any signs of fading away. After taking a trip to the Xin family house, they headed for the Civil Affairs Bureau. In just less than an hour, they were back out again. Xin Haoyue had finally and legally become a married woman now. She looked at the small red book in her hands and felt a little dazed while staring at it. Sigh. I've finally become a wed woman in the eyes of the law. Chen Xinan, who was currently backing up the car, glanced at her and remarked in a cold tone, You sound quite disappointed, Mrs. Chen. Xin Haoyue leaned over towards him and smiled. But with such a handsome beauty to stay with me for the rest of my life, I think it's worth it. A beauty? Chen Xinan raised a brow while thinking to himself, I'll definitely have to deal with her tonight. On the third day after their marriage, Chen Xinan and Xin Haoyue went according to their plans and began their honeymoon trip. Since Xin Haoyue didn't really know much of the famous scenic areas around the area, all of it was arranged by Chen Xinan. They both watched the sun rise up from the edge of a seascape, ate boundless desserts, visited famous and towering mountains, saw amazingly clear and beautiful waters. The two of them enjoyed various kinds of awestruck sceneries together. Though, having to accompany him in his messing about during the night after a big day was really tiring, Xin Haoyue had to admit that moving to one place after another, delving into the customs of all these different locations, was both interesting and rewarding. In the blink of an eye, half a month had already passed. During these past 2 days, both of them happened to be staying on an island. The weather on this island was very cool. After waking up and dressing himself, Chen Xinan fiddled with the camera. He was looking through the photos he took of her these past 2 days here. The smiling her, the her who deliberately hid from the camera, the time when she stood peacefully in front of the sunset, the moments when she was playing with the water. Each image of these images of Xin Haoyue was like a beautiful painting. It carved itself deeply into the depths of his heart. While looking at these photos, a smile slowly grew on Chen Xinan's lips subconsciously. He got up and went back to the bedroom, only to find a small little ball nestled inside of the white blankets. While walking over to her, he shouted, Honey, it's time to wake up. The person on the bed didn't seem to move. She also showed no signs of waking up. Honey, it's time to wake up. The sun is already up. Chen Xinan sat on the edge of the bed and lifted up the blanket. Didn't you say you wanted to go swimming? If the sun gets too hot later, you'll... Xin Haoyue, who was completely exhausted and in need of some shut-eye, was startled to find her blanket suddenly pulled away. However, since she couldn't even bear to open her eyes right now, she pulled another corner of the blanket and covered it over her head, wrapping herself up tightly. Upon seeing this, Chen Xinan laughed. He leaned over towards her and brought out his best threat. If you don't get up, then I guess we're not going out today. We can just spend our day on the hotel bed. After he said this, his hand slowly crawled into the blanket. Xin Haoyue hurriedly avoided his hand as if it was made of electricity. She quickly sat up and opened her sleepy eyes, saying, Fine, I'm getting up. Because she suddenly did this while half asleep, she couldn't help herself from falling forward, which happened to be right into Chen Xinan's arms. The latter reached out to stroke her hair. After helping her smooth out her messy bedhead, he said in a soft and soothing tone, If you're really tired, then we don't have to go out today. We can just reschedule for tomorrow. Xin Haoyue closed her eyes as she shook her head in his arms. Wouldn't it be the same if we go tomorrow? She then raised her head to look at him. Are you not going to mess around tonight? Chen Xinan proudly and firmly expressed himself. Wouldn't I be doing myself wrong if I don't mess around during my honeymoon? Xin Haoyue. I really want to slap his face with my slippers. In the end, Xin Haoyue still managed to fight for another half hour of sleep for herself. After washing up and having breakfast, it was already close to 10:30. Xin Haoyue took her sun hat and sunglasses while pulling his arm. Come on, let's go. I had a look at the beaches here the other day. The water is very clear. Heh, so now you feel excited? Who was the one who wouldn't get up earlier? Xin Haoyue naturally ignored his remarks. After playing to her heart's content, Xin Haoyue laid down on a lounge chair. She leisurely watched the other people on the beach, having fun. Chen Xinan, who was lying close beside her, would take a few shots of his wife with the camera he brought from time to time. When Xin Haoyue turned back to look at him, she just happened to see him take a few more shots of her. An idea suddenly sprouted up in her mind. She got up and went to grab his camera. I want to take a few photos of you two. I want to show them to Mom, Dad, and Grandpa. Chen Xinan quickly evaded her. The expression on his face was clearly unwilling. Xin Haoyue pretended to be angry. Chen Xinan, you're a big boss, but aren't you being too petty? I just want to take a few pictures. However, the reason why Chen Xinan did this was actually due to another reason. A few days ago, she also said that she wanted to take a few photos. But in the end, once the camera left her hands, only a few photos were left of the dozens he took. After realizing this, when they returned to the hotel last night, he asked her what happened, only to hear her respond casually while watching TV and eating fruits. The photos you took were too ugly, that's why I deleted them. Chen Xinan was pissed. He clearly thought that all the photos he took of his wife looked super good. And so he was so angry that night that he deliberately went at it with even greater force than usual. As a result, during the entire ordeal, she ended up clenching her hands on his shoulders and told him to slow down. But in the end, she still tried to coax him with a few pleasant words. It was only then did he let her go with reluctance. With what happened, Xin Haoyue, who had been taught a lesson, never played with his camera again. However, not wanting to play with it and him not wanting to give it to her were two different issues. Xin Haoyue pounced over at him in an instant, trying to snatch the camera. However, Chen Xinan raised his hand up high and didn't allow her to get what she wanted. Xin Haoyue was so angry that she was just about to bite him, but someone suddenly appeared with a hearty laugh. Why are the two of you fighting? When she heard the clear voice of the man, she looked over towards the source and saw a man with a bronzed and firm chest exposed in front of her. He had a smile on his face. Xin Haoyue was just about to ask who he was, but Chen Xinan reached and quickly pressed her head to his chest. After narrowing his eyes slightly, he asked in an imposing manner, "Who are you?" "Don't get me wrong, sir. The two of you seemed like you were here on holiday, so I wanted to tell you that, coincidentally, the son of the richest man in town is getting married today. With many people around here having gone to watch the event, I just passed by to see if the two of you were interested. If you are, then you can go see it as well." "Oh yeah, it's right at Chengguang Street. Also, there's a very spiritual man there today. He can tell a person's fate. But he won't tell someone their fortune so easily. He'll only mention it if fate calls for it." After saying this with a smile, he added, "People who come here to play would generally try their luck. If they actually can get their fortune told, they usually consider their trip successful." Chen Xinan laughed in disdain when he heard this. That sounds ridiculous. Who the hell even believes in that kind of stuff in this day and age? Xin Haoyue felt that the man was just being nice and informed them. With that thought in mind, she pulled Chen Xinan's hand and told him to lay it off. Chen Xinan's eyes darkened. He slightly raised his chin and said to the man, "Thank you very much, but me and my wife still has a lot of private things to say. Can you leave now?" When he heard this, the man laughed awkwardly and quickly excused himself. Xin Haoyue came out of his arms. She had a smile on her face as she asked, "President Chen, what's this murderous aura I'm feeling from you? What are you trying to do?" Chen Xinan snorted. There was no way he would say that the guy from earlier had his eyes all over her when they were talking earlier.